Hogwarts, the first capitalist of the magical world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 228, Father and Son Confrontation. August 8th, the Leaky Cauldron, London, England. Grindelwald shook the red wine in the glass, put it to his nose, and sniffed it gently, then drank it all in one gulp quite elegantly. The smooth and fragrant red liquid went down his throat into his stomach. Satisfied, he showed a kind smile, and looked at the boy in front of him. I thought you would be with your senior for the entire holiday, but I didn't expect it would be for the next month. You actually returned to the British wizarding world. Can't you let go of your business here? Or is there another reason? That's, of course, to keep my dear father company. Karl shook the red wine glass, his beautiful blue eyes staring at the bright red liquid in the glass. I have to spend some of my holiday time with my family. After all, I received an owl message from Professor McGonagall when I was in Russia. He said that since mid-July, Headmaster Dumbledore has disappeared again. This year's recruitment of new students is in charge. It all fell on her alone. The work pressure was very high. I hope I can solve it. Cough. Cough. Grindelwald coughed twice to hide his embarrassment and continued to look at Cole with a smile. It's okay. If the work pressure is really that great, I can pay for a few temporary teaching assistants. Professor McGonagall is a respectable woman. I'm happy to help her. Spending a little money is nothing. After all, the day you were at Moscow State University, it took a lot of time to arrange all the stuff and take care of everything. I think sometimes you also need to learn your consumption concepts. Humph. Carol snorted with a sneer, put the goblet in his hand heavily on the table, and stared at the handsome old man in front of him. Don't talk nonsense to me. I helped you complete your plan, but on the day of my appearance at the banquet, you didn't even want to show your face, and you couldn't wait to run back to England to enjoy your own world with that old bee. I now seriously suspect that the plans you mentioned before were just traps designed to get me away. As for letting me play your daughter, it's because of your pettiness. Having said that, Cole pointed at Grindelwald without any hesitation. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Grindelwald denied excitedly. What do you mean by my pettiness? Am I, in your heart, an old rogue who is greedy for my own emotional enjoyment and has no bottom line at all? Your words hurt my heart, kid. I must get the proper apology. Feel sorry. Carol curled his lips in disdain, and without even drinking the glass of red wine, he stood up and prepared to leave. He said in a cold tone the moment he turned around. If there's nothing else, I'll leave first. I didn't drink this glass of wine. After you pay the bill, you can do whatever you want. Wait, don't be so anxious, Kit. Grindelwald quickly grabbed the angry Karl, comforted him with words, and asked him to sit down again. It was not until Carol sat down that he showed a slightly submissive expression and apologized awkwardly regarding the banquet where you debuted in the European wizarding world. It was indeed my fault that I didn't attend. I sincerely apologize to you for this, but this also reflects my trust in you, doesn't it? I'm very confident that with your ability, it would be easy for you to handle such a small situation, and the fact is just as I expected. You managed to win over most of the saints with just a dance and a speech. I am truly proud of you, Kit. You conquer everyone with your charm. That's not going to be easy. Karl had a little pride on his face, and he was very confident in his own charm point, but it is still very happy to be praised in person like this, especially by the person in front of you. When he was young, he was also considered one of the most charming men in the European wizarding world. I heard that the young master of the Lestrange family has already surrendered to you. In the month that you have been away from the French wizarding world, there have been several duels between teenagers. You have the chance to be severely injured by that boy named Kyle. Your charm is really surprising, Kit. Have you ever thought about showing a little kindness to the other person? Get lost, you old pervert who likes to spy on others and pry into their private lives. The relationship between the two had just eased a little, but Grindelwald's playful personality made him want to tease Karl in front of him. As a result, as soon as he finished speaking, Karl instantly got angry, and after angrily scolding, he was ready to leave again. Grindelwald could only stand up again, holding Karl's right hand tightly, and explained helplessly, "It's just some jokes between father and son. Why do you take it so seriously, kid? Is it not okay for me to stop talking? In my life, you and Al are the only two people who make me beg in such a humble way. You definitely have his genes. There's no doubt about that. There are so many people around. Please give me some face." Face? Karl turned his head to look at the handsome old man in front of him with a sarcastic smile. "Why do you have such a face in front of me? In my past life, it was Aunt Rosia who played the role of my mother. Although Dumbledore is unreliable in school, he is my biggest backer in the British wizarding world after all. And what about you? I admit that the business in Germany had your help, but it seems that the cooperation between the two of us is limited to that. I absolutely cannot tolerate your spying on me." "I'm not spying on you," Grindelwald shouted with a bit of a smile, then gently wiped his face with his right hand. That old but handsome face soon turned into a resolute and courageous middle-aged man. He pointed at his current face and spoke in a professional tone. "Mr. Hohenzollern, Renaud Rosier sends his regards, or in a different capacity, the CEO of the First Savings Bank of the magical world. Please report your current work to the distinguished chairman regarding the sudden large amount of spending you made in Russia one day. Did you do it yourself?" "Well, this is me." Carol looked at the middle-aged man's face, which was already a little blurry in his mind. He was embarrassed for a long time before he stammered. Then he obediently returned to his seat, sat there obediently, and looked at Grindelwald with some embarrassment. Grindelwald also changed his face back to his true appearance and looked at Cole with a little temper. "I told you I'm not spying on you. I'm not that boring, and as far as I know, my credibility in the wizarding world is not so bad." Chapter 229, Anti-Fan Leader Grindelwald. "This." Karl touched his face awkwardly. He could hear the resentment in Grindelwald's words. Some of them were too afraid to look into each other's eyes and could only change the subject. "Let's not discuss this issue for now. You specifically asked me to meet you here. Is there something important?" "Don't change the subject." Grindelwald stared at Cole with an unyielding look. He saw the boy's guilty conscience and continued to increase his firepower. Two penniless British teenagers wandering the streets of Moscow is enough to arouse suspicion. As a result, with just a few words, a respected professor vouched for him, and he was able to enter the most famous university in Russia. Isn't this strange? That country is so poor now that the soldiers on the submarines will steal the precious metal detector components on their submarines and sell them. Isn't it strange that there are so many valuable musical instruments stored in the university's music room? Just a simple exchange can bring a group of people who have just experienced major changes in their country to life. A college student who was confused about the future and felt hopeless about reality kindly invited two foreigners he didn't know to join his party. This is just too much of a coincidence, don't you think? Mr. Hohenzollern, you still say you didn't spy on me? Karl seized the loophole in the other party's words and once again took the initiative into his own hands. Grindelwald was not at all flustered and calmly poured himself another full glass of red wine. Across the bright red wine, he looked at the angry boy in front of him and smiled contemptuously. "I said I didn't spy on you. I simply inferred these details based on your purchase records. After all, in that country right now, most people have a hard time even meeting their daily necessities. No one would buy such a large amount of food and musical instruments at one time. Now, all I want to ask, my dear child, is what instrument you finally chose to play. Is it playing the piano like a prince under the moonlight, or the cello or violin? These two elegant instruments are also good. It's none of your business." Karl yelled. His voice was loud, but his momentum was much weaker. Grindelwald did not ask any further questions, but opened his arms like an open-minded father. "Don't shout. This is a public area. Since you don't want to talk, I won't ask too much. I always respect your privacy, but as a father, I still need to pay attention to my child's emotional life. Karl's cheeks twitched wildly, and his teeth chattered in anger. This was the first time that he was completely controlled by someone. The handsome old man in front of him did have some strength point. After taking a few deep breaths to calm down, he thought for a moment and immediately asked nervously, then, Cedric, you mean he might figure it out? Grindelwald crossed his arms, looking like he had everything under control. Don't worry, when I saw the bill, I had already deduced the approximate result, so I arranged for someone to tamper with the desserts. He should feel drunk after eating them, fall in sleep peacefully and beautifully. You don't need to thank me for the opportunity I created for you. This is what a father should do. What? Karl looked at him in surprise and pointed a finger at him. So it's because of you. Grindelwald calmly pressed down the finger that Karl had extended and said with a smile on his face, don't worry, I promised you that I would never spy on you. I always keep my word. After all the manipulation, I have ordered all members of the Saints in Moscow to leave the city. Whatever you did that day, those are all memories that belong to you alone. Isn't that very thoughtful? Of course, if you encounter any problems or difficulties during this process, as your father, I welcome you to ask me any questions at any time. It's enough. Karl roared in a low voice. He had always felt that there were emotional problems between him and Cedric at school. There has always been a group of girls who are very concerned, and they even deliberately use very obvious and childish behavior in an attempt to influence me. For example, during lunch, I would deliberately create an environment for the two of us to be alone together, but he never expected that the real leader of the Black Fans was the person sitting in front of him. Grindelwald, known as the First Dark Lord, is his biological father. Thinking of this, Cole put his hand on his forehead in despair and lowered his head, remaining silent. Grindelwald didn't say anything else, but because of his own child, he seemed unwilling to confide in him. With a hint of disappointment on their faces, the old man and the young man sat in the corner of the bar. They looked at each other in silence for an unknown amount of time. Karl looked up at the handsome old man in front of him with some tiredness. Okay, this topic ends now. Don't have any more fantasies or ask any more questions. I don't want our cooperation to end here, and I absolutely will not allow anyone to interfere in my private life. Now, tell me, why did you call me here? That's really sad. Grindelwald put on an expression of being deeply hurt, pressing one hand on his chest and shaking his head. Stop pretending. Karl raised his voice and stared at the other person with a stern gaze. I know you are acting. Don't try to use your acting to fool an equally good actor. There must be something I have to do, or you would have been with that old bee. Spend this last bit of holiday time with me and get to the point. I don't have time to chat with you here. Okay, you're such a boring kid. Grindelwald wiped away the 2 tears from the corners of his eyes with his fingers and instantly changed from an old father who was heartbroken by his own children. He transformed himself into the leader of the Saints and became the Dark Lord feared by the entire European wizarding world. It's actually not a big deal. You disappeared from the British wizarding world in the past 2 months. The first savings bank in the wizarding world is in a little trouble. Those greedy goblins at Gringotts. Obviously, he doesn't want to see the wealth of the entire British wizarding world flow into your hands, so they spread rumors that every loan your bank makes is made with depositors' savings. This rumor is extremely primitive and full of loopholes, but wizards know nothing about financial matters. There have been 4 bank runs in just 2 months, so I want to see if you have any good solutions. After all, you are the chairman of this bank, aren't you? Chapter 230, Solutions to Problems. Please be careful with your words, Mr. Renault. Karl pretended to be serious. The first savings bank of the magical world. I'm just a small shareholder with 5% of the shares. It's not the so-called chairman. As a joint stock company, I think we haven't elected a formal chairman yet. The nominal honorary chairman is our great headmaster Dumbledore. Yes, everything you said is right. Grindelwald's face showed indifference, and he continued to ask in a sarcastic tone. Very good then, Mr. Hohenzollern. As one of the shareholders of this bank, you are very helpful to the development of our company. Do you have any valuable suggestions? After all, if no intervention is made, this bank may go bankrupt tomorrow, because, according to my speculation, the mysterious financial power behind us may no longer be able to inject cash flow into this bank. What should I do? Grindelwald deliberately asked this question at the end, with a smug expression on his face. It was as if saying, come and beg me quickly. As long as you beg your father, I will immediately take a handful of gold galleons and use the money to kill those greedy goblins. Karl looked at the smug face, and his cheeks twitched wildly. It turned out that he was waiting for him here. This old man asked me to come here today specifically, and it turns out he has nothing good to say. The other party already knew that he had been busy raising funds in the Muggle world for the past month. After all, whether it was building a factory to produce new drugs in New York, or promoting the sales of new drugs in Europe, all of which consumed a lot of my money. Indeed, I don't have much cash in my account now. The other party knows all this very well and just wants to force me to surrender. This guy may really have become mentally abnormal after being imprisoned by me for half a century. His various actions towards himself were just like a father throwing a tantrum at a child. Forcing his son to give in to him in some childish games may be his way of expressing his love. But Karl was a stubborn man. He slowly leaned back and placed his hands on the armrests on both sides of the chair. He half tilted his head in an arrogant posture and looked at the old man in front of him with a smile. Dear Mr. Renault, I'm deeply sorry for the question you just raised, but this regret is not because of the difficulty of the problem, but because I regret that I chose a person with no ability to serve as CEO. It was the first time I misjudged someone. Grindelwald was obviously stunned, but he reacted quickly, his face full of dark lines, and he spoke in a low voice. Mr. Hohenzollern, I must make it clear to you that this problem is not due to any problem with our ability to do our job. The crux of the matter is that our bank was established too recently, compared to the reputation that Gringotts has accumulated over hundreds of years. It has only been established for a short time. It is impossible for us to convince depositors to trust us in the face of rumors. This problem itself has no solution, because the time span cannot be changed in a short period of time. The only thing we can do now is to use huge amounts of wealth to demonstrate the strength of the bank. Nothing could be more persuasive than a mountain of gold galleons, and I think you have an easy way to obtain that amount of wealth. There are no unsolvable problems in the world. Cole crossed his legs with an arrogant expression, and the smile between his eyebrows seemed like a mockery. You think that the method you just described is the only way to solve the problem now, only because you have put the steps to solve the problem in the problem itself. We can completely jump out of the problem itself and find a completely different path beyond the problem itself. Grindelwald was a little confused. Karl looked full of confidence. He stood up, took the bottle of red wine beside him, and poured red wine into the 2 empty glasses. He spoke calmly across the bright red liquid. That's right. Apart from the question itself, you can actually think from another angle. You actually already know the mastermind behind this matter. Why do we need to compete in a normal way? If we can't solve our own problems, then we should solve the people who cause the problems. The first savings bank in the wizarding world was established too recently and cannot compete with Gringotts, which has a century-old reputation. Very good then. He sat back in his seat, picked up the poured red wine, and put it to his nose and sniffed it. The fully awakened red wine exuded an intoxicating aroma. Drink up the wine in the glass in one gulp. The smooth and charming liquid brings you extraordinary enjoyment. Karl took out a white napkin, wiped the corners of his mouth gracefully, then folded the napkin and suddenly slammed it heavily on the dining table. The cloth folded into a square made a loud noise due to the violent impact. Using the noise as cover, the boy crossed his arms and spoke calmly. Then, let's make that century of credibility vanish into thin air today. After saying that, the attention of everyone in the bar was attracted by the sudden noise. Under Grindelwald's astonished gaze, Karl, who was sitting opposite him, began to change his figure point from a tall and handsome young man. He gradually turned into a short, hunchbacked, bald and fat man point that disgusting and twisted face looked like a rat. When did you learn my disguise magic? Grindelwald said in a low voice. Do I need to learn this? My dear father, I'm your son, Karl responded easily, but the sound coming from his short, hunched, fat body was so obscene. As soon as the short fat man finished speaking, he grabbed the corner of the dining table and overturned the entire table. The expensive crystal swan neck decanter and the two crystal wine glasses were smashed to pieces. Taking advantage of this chaos, Grindelwald disappeared silently into the darkness of the corner just before leaving. He glanced back, looked at the chair that was splashed with remaining red wine, and said helplessly, "But it's just a game between father and son. You really are a vengeful kid." After saying that, he left the bar directly, and after confirming that Grindelwald had left, the short fat man opened his arms with agility that was totally inconsistent with his body size. He jumped onto another dining table and looked at the stunned crowd. Said loudly, "Let me introduce myself. I'm Peter Pettigrew, the successor to the great Dark Lord. You can also respectfully call me the new Dark Lord." A deathly silence fell over the entire bar, and everyone looked at each other in bewilderment. Finally, they all turned their eyes to the short fat man who was barely as tall as an average person when standing on the dining table. Ha. Ha ha ha. After a long silence, the customers at the table closest to Peter Pettigrew could no longer hold back their laughter. The laughter echoed in the air, infecting more and more customers, and the drinking crowd all laughed wildly. Some people even laughed and pounded their hands on the table, and the whole bar was filled with a cheerful atmosphere. Until a green light with a breath of death sent the man who led the laughter into a dream from which he seemed to never wake up. The deathly silence that had just settled over the bar once again. Chapter 231 The Elegant Robber. Avada Kedavra. Murder. 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 Quickly notify the auras at the Ministry of Magic. The crowd in the bar exploded instantly, and the customers who were just chatting and laughing ran away from their seats. He was wandering around the bar like a headless fly, shouting hysterically and trying desperately to squeeze towards the only exit. Boom. It was not until another loud explosion was heard from behind that the panicked crowd froze in place and turned their heads mechanically to look. All I saw was Peter Pettigrew standing on the dining table with a strange black object in his hand. White smoke was rising slowly from the top, and above him was the chalky ceiling. A big hole was created by some strange magic, and fine white dust fell on Peter Pettigrew's bald head, making him look very funny. Mind your manners, gentlemen. Peter Pettigrew jumped off the dining table, grabbed the unfortunate guy who was lying on the ground, and threw him to the nearest wizard. Take him away. After all, we are drinking under the same roof. Don't you have such a sense of merit? Peter Pettigrew was shaking the strange black object in his hand. His body posture was distorted and exaggerated. The wizard who was being aimed at by the dark pipe didn't understand what the other party was holding. But his intuition told him that the thing was very dangerous, so he quickly took over the unfortunate guy and joined the other frightened wizards under the other party's supervision. They lined up in an orderly manner to leave the leaky cauldron. If Professor McGonagall saw the strict queuing discipline, she might praise them. Peter Pettigrew watched those people leave, allowing them to shout wildly after leaving the bar, just when the last old figure was about to follow the large group to escape from the scene. He reached out and grabbed the other person by the back of his collar. "You are the owner of this bar, and I'm a customer here. How can you leave before I order anything?" Old Tom, who was grabbed by the collar, was so upset that he could only give an awkward but polite smile. "Mr. Peter Pettigrew, would you like something to drink? How about I treat you for free?" "No need." Peter Pettigrew also smiled, his eyes revealing confidence, and it seemed that he was very satisfied with his smile. But in old Tom's eyes, that smile looked so hideous. When the other party was about to pick their pockets, the old men immediately squatted down with their heads in their hands and cried loudly, "Don't kill me, don't kill me. I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything. I didn't mean to kill you." The Sound of a few coins falling on the table reached old Tom's ears, and he looked up in horror. Peter Pettigrew took out 10 glittering gold galleons from his ragged pocket and placed them neatly on the bar counter. Pointing at the money, he said in an apologetic tone, "I'm sorry to interrupt your business. This money is to compensate for the damage to your house today and the cost of buying a cup of butterbeer." Old Tom looked at the 10 gold galleons, his eyes twitching wildly. He looked at his messy bar and waved his hands. "No, really no, considering the tables and the ceiling and the butterbeer you ordered, it won't cost 10 galleons. I know." Peter Pettigrew spoke again, and it was obvious that he was trying to make his tone calmer, but the sound it made was still low and obscene. He pointed at the messy bar and the holes in the ceiling. "It's definitely not a big loss just looking at these, but I'm going to destroy some more things later, so I'll pay you first. As for your loss of today's turnover, I'll have to go get some money first and then compensate you. So I hope I can have a nice cup of butterbeer when I come back the second time. Thank you." "You're quite polite." Hearing the word "thank you" at the end, old Tom was completely stunned. If it weren't for the fact that this family had just killed someone here with a killing curse, he really thought that the man in front of him was just an ugly gentleman. He speaks in a polite and refined manner and is even more generous than some of the drunkards who drink here all year round. "Thank you for the compliment, little love," Peter responded with a smile, but that smile looked so obscene. After old Tom put away the 10 gold galleons, Peter Pettigrew made a gesture with his hand to hide. At the same time, he kindly reminded, "I'm about to start working, so I suggest you hide under the bar to avoid getting hurt. At the same time, you must protect your personal belongings. I'm going to get the money." As he spoke, under the stunned gaze of old Tom, Peter Pettigrew took out the dirty pocket. He pulled out a metal ball that looked like a cantaloupe, unplugged the pull tab, and threw it toward the back of the bar with a smile. Boom! There was a loud bang accompanied by white smoke, and a big hole was blown directly in the back wall of the bar. Peter Pettigrew looked at the white building standing at the end of Diagon Alley. He first turned around and gracefully bowed slightly to apologize to old Tom, who had just poked half of his head out from the bar. He then put on a long black trench coat, a black wide-brimmed hat, and held a burning cigar in his mouth. Humming elegant classical jazz music, he took out a brand new Thompson submachine gun from a suitcase containing a violin. He rushed towards Gringotts in one step. The streets of Diagon Alley were already filled with all kinds of spectators. The drunkards rushing out of the bar are the best natural loudspeakers. A few desperate shouts had already spread everything that happened in the bar throughout the streets and alleys. A group of wizards looked at the strange-looking Peter Pettigrew, all with puzzled expressions on their faces. Peter Pettigrew seemed to enjoy the attention and smiled and responded to all the passers-by. Even to some young women, he took off his hat. Polite behavior, elegant and gorgeous macupe, and a short and fat body. It formed an image that was both beautiful and awkward until Peter Pettigrew walked to the ornate bronze door of Gringotts. No one tried to stop it, not even the goblins guarding the gate, who saw such a weirdo walking up to them. He asked in a low voice, not without some doubt, "Sir, may I ask what brings you to Gringotts?" "I want to withdraw money," Peter Pettigrew responded gracefully. The fairy guarding the gate looked at the other party in confusion. Although he felt something was wrong, he still asked as a routine matter, "Did you bring your vault key?" "No." "Do you have any other documents to exchange?" "No." "Or did you send someone from the Ministry of Magic?" "No." This round of questions and answers confused the goblin guarding the gate, and he finally couldn't bear it anymore and shouted, "You don't have any proof. How can Gringotts help you withdraw money?" "I have this." Peter Pettigrew smiled and pointed the black muzzle of the Chicago typewriter in his hand at the goblin in front of him. Then he pulled the trigger directly. The muzzle flashed with flames, and the brass bullet shell fell to the ground, making a pleasant sound like a wind chime. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 232. This is called Professionalism. A full 60 bullets rained down like a rainstorm, shooting into the body of the tiny goblin, and shattering the gorgeous little vest uniform into pieces. The bullet tore through the muscles, and destroyed the bones, and the fragments of internal organs mixed with blood splattered all over Peter Pettigrew's face. Coupled with that obscene and weird smile, the wizards watching nearby felt a chill down their spines until the gunfire stopped. The smell of blood mixed with gunpowder began to spread throughout the streets of Diagon Alley. The wizards who were watching the fun at first only realized that there was a strange black object in Peter Pettigrew's hand. It's not some strange toy, but an outright murderous weapon. Emergency mode activated. A dark wizard wants to. The other goblin guarding the gate finally reacted and used magic to increase the volume of his voice as he shouted towards Gringotts. Unfortunately, before he could finish his words, a 9mm bullet blew his ridiculously huge head into pieces. The door of Gringotts began to close slowly after the gunshot. Looking at the slowly closing bronze door, Peter Pettigrew did not make any movement. He just silently bit the stick at the corner of his mouth. The cigar, which was wet with the goblin's blood and went out, was gently taken off and thrown aside. He took out another cigar, lit it with magic, and started smoking it comfortably. Surrounded by cigar smoke, the short and fat figure began to move slowly. As if dancing some kind of rhythmic dance. He held a Thompson submachine gun in his left hand and pieces of dark green objects that looked like plasticine in his right hand. They were carefully attached around the tightly closed bronze door, and after being properly placed, they were connected together using white wires. Alright, everyone, the next performance is going to be a bit violent, so I'm giving you some serious advice here. Please, move indoors as soon as possible to avoid unnecessary injuries. After connecting the wires, Peter Pettigrew turned to look at the group of wizards who were still watching. He persuaded with a sincere tone, and then, under the gaze of everyone, he lit the white fuse with the burning cigar butt. Please, rest assured, dear customers, the door of Gringotts is made of special magical materials. No magic can destroy this gate. Gringotts has always been the safest place in the British wizarding world, so please calm down and don't shout. Behind the bronze door, the oldest goblin was standing on the highest counter, facing the group of wizards trapped inside Gringotts. Try your best to comfort. But before it could finish its words, it heard a few dull sounds like the beating of giant drums coming from behind the gilded bronze door. At the same time, the ground beneath his feet trembled slightly, and the gorgeous gilded bronze door fell straight to the ground, surrounded by dense white smoke. The moment the bronze door touched the ground, everyone felt a vibration under their buttocks. No matter wizards or goblins, all eyes present were fixed on the heavy bronze door lying on the ground. The old goblin in the lead had his eyes twitching wildly, and his old brain kept working, but he still couldn't think of a powerful black magic that could break open the bronze door so easily. But just as he had not finished speaking, with a gunshot, a bullet shot directly through his head. This puts an end to this thought process that seems to never have an answer. Gunshots rang out again, and countless 9mm brass bullets shot large holes in the wall of white smoke. The goblins hiding behind the tall counter fell one after another. Some of them were lucky enough to die instantly from a bullet wound to the head. Some people were unlucky and were shot through the knees or shoulders. They could only lie on the ground, pressing their injured parts and groaning in pain. The wizard group was much luckier. At the moment when the bronze gate was demolished by blasting, a wizard with a thick American English accent came. He immediately shouted loudly, "Everyone, get down, this is robbery." With this warning, all the wizards in Gringotts smoothly fell to the ground with their hands covering their heads. He dodged the bullet fire this time and the gunfire stopped. They looked up nervously, only to see a not very tall black figure appear at the doorway surrounded by white smoke. He was wearing a handsome long trench coat. His face was covered with a mixture of blood and strange objects, and he had a weird and obscene smile. It's quite nauseating just to look at, but the image of him holding a Thompson submachine gun in his left hand and a cigar in his right mouth. And all the human men present admitted that this look was indeed very handsome. However, compared to some people who want to see the true face of the robber, others are more professional and want to save their lives. The wizard with a thick American accent had already turned all his pockets inside out. To show that he had no hidden weapons. His wallet and bank cards were neatly placed in front of him. He even took the time to write down the password on his bank card. It seems you are familiar with this process. The moment Peter Pettigrew stepped into the hall of Gringotts, he saw this most outstanding wizard. He squatted down and asked in an approving tone, "No, I just want to save my life, sir. I have taken out all the valuables on me. I don't have any weapons. Please don't hurt me." The wizard lying on the ground replied tremblingly, paying great attention to details during the entire answering process. He covered both sides of his head tightly and pressed his face to the ground to ensure that you cannot see the robber's true face from any angle. Avoid getting yourself killed. Look, this is called professionalism. Peter Pettigrew praised this highly and pointed the black muzzle of his gun at all the wizards lying on the ground one by one. He said angrily, "Can't you even imitate me? Ladies and gentlemen, do I have to go and ask you one by one for your money and property? This will increase my workload. Don't you know that? And you're actually curious about what I look like. Have you ever thought that I have every reason to kill you here, since you have seen my true appearance?" These words, like the whisper of death, frightened the remaining wizards half to death. They all trembled like sieves. There was fear in their eyes, and several people wanted to take out their wands, but when they looked up, they saw the goblins dead behind the counter. When they saw blood flowing all over the ground, the wizards, who had never seen such a scene, were frightened out of their wits. They didn't even have the courage to raise their wands, and they leaned against each other with looks of fear on their faces. Peter Pettigrew walked up to the crowd, slowly squatted down, tapped the air in front of everyone with the barrel of his gun and said, "I am in a good mood today, and there are ladies here. I will not hurt you, but I think you should learn from the gentleman just now and put all your valuables here. Line up one by one. Don't crowd." Chapter 233 Hidden Script. There was no crying, no noise, and no crazy screaming. After Peter Pettigrew said this, the wizards, who were leaning against each other, immediately and obediently placed all their belongings neatly on the open space. Then they lined up and walked to the door one by one. During this process, a few brave wizards even tried to communicate with each other. Peter Pettigrew also responded gracefully to all of them, even to the point of seeing a lady getting anxious or nervous. When she stood up, she sprained her ankle and politely asked the two ladies sitting next to her to help her out first. And directly and generously exempted the other party from paying the money and property that should be paid this time. She has elegant manners and witty conversation. If it weren't for the blood of those goblins on her face. These wizards were almost forgetting the strange weapon in the other party's hand just a few seconds ago. Killed almost all the goblins in the room. Alright, gentlemen, please bow your heads and put your hands on the shoulders of the people in front of you. Leave in an orderly manner. Do not look back or make any movements to avoid misunderstandings and unnecessary casualties. I also hope that during this process, all gentlemen can maintain their manners and not behave inappropriately. After all the wizards handed over their belongings, Peter Pettigrew pointed at the open door and said calmly. He personally supervised everyone to leave in an orderly manner, but during the queue, the gentleman with a thick American accent he pulled him out of the team and forced all of his belongings back into his pocket. "Please don't hurt me, sir. I will do everything according to your instructions." The male wizard who was pulled out of the team was a little bit at a loss as to what to do by this sudden action. So much so that he accidentally saw the face of Peter Pettigrew, and he nervously covered his eyes with his hands. He begged desperately for mercy, and Peter Pettigrew looked at him with a smile. Pointing at the valuables that were stuffed back into the other party's hands, he spoke calmly. "Don't be nervous, sir. Everyone here has seen my face, and I'm not trying to hurt them. I am a man of my words and I follow my principles. Don't worry, I will never kill you. Take back your belongings, but you have to do me a favor." "What's up?" The wizard, who was comforted, felt a little calmer, but his body was still trembling when he spoke. Peter Pettigrew patted the other person's shoulder, signaling him not to be nervous, and then slowly spoke. "It's not a very difficult task. After you leave, go to the British Ministry of Magic as quickly as possible to inform the Aurors." "What did you say?" Upon hearing this, the wizard's body stopped shaking, but his face was full of surprise. As a muggle-born wizard who grew up in the Great Lakes region of the United States, He had no contact with the magical world for 11 years. He was very experienced in robbery and had seen countless robbers, big and small, but without exception, they all gave fierce warnings when releasing the hostages. Say something like, "If you dare to call the police when you leave, I will find a way to kill you before I go to jail." Something like this. This was the first time in his life that a robber asked a hostage to help him call the police. You heard that right. Seeing the other person's dazed look, little Peter with a loving heart did not get angry, but spoke patiently instead. "I would like you to inform the auras of the British Ministry of Magic. Judging from your professional actions just now, you must have grown up in the Rust Belt of the United States. So please translate it into a language that you can understand and be familiar with. Once you leave this building, go call the police for me, okay?" "Yes, sir." "No problem, sir." The male wizard nodded frantically. After all, things had come to this point, and if he didn't agree, he would be ignorant. So as the last person to be robbed, this guy just left and opened the door of Gringotts. He ran towards the direction of the magic step at the speed of a 100-meter race. After releasing all the wizards, Peter Pettigrew put their belongings into a magic bag he had prepared long ago. Humming elegant jazz music. Holding a cigar in his right hand and a Thompson submachine gun in his left hand, he walked towards the goblins who were still alive. He first found a goblin who looked younger and stepped on the other's pierced knee. Looking down at that weird and ugly big head. "Okay, it's your turn now. Take me to the underground vault. I need to come here to withdraw some money." "Thank you, Gringotts. Will never give you even a penny that doesn't belong to you." Boom. The goblin whose wound was stepped on was twitching in pain all over, but his tone was still firm. But the other party seemed to be in a hurry. Before he could finish his words, a gunshot rang out, and the huge head was pierced by the bullet. Peter Pettigrew looked at the Peter star on his leather shoes and frowned slightly. He continued to walk to the next living goblin with the gun in hand and continued to make his request in the same calm tone. "We will never." Boom. Gringotts' reputation spans thousands of years. Boom. "No one can get from here." Boom. The same question, different answers, but often as soon as the goblin said the first sentence, a gunshot would follow. Peter Pettigrew strolled leisurely in the hall, making his demands on the surviving goblins, and after the other party refuses, he will be sent directly to heaven. It was clean and neat without any delay. Ask, answer, shoot. Ask, answer, shoot. The sound of gunfire continued to echo in the room until finally the two young goblins watched as the black figure slowly walked towards them. He was so frightened that he was leaning against the counter and shaking. "Take me to the underground vault. I need to come here to withdraw some money. Thank you. I'll take you there. I'll take you there right away." Boom. As soon as little Peter the Love Heart expressed his request, a fairy with slightly lighter skin agreed to it impatiently. What greeted him was a bullet, which entered from between his eyebrows and created a bowl-sized hole in the back of his head. Brain matter mixed with blood splattered onto the expensive solid wood counter behind. It also splashed on the face of the last surviving goblin. Feeling the warm liquid on his face, the fairy's spirit collapsed on the spot, and he screamed hysterically. "He has already promised you. Why did you kill him?" "I'm sorry. I was just doing it out of habit. It was my mistake. I apologize for it." Little Love Peter sincerely apologizes at the same time. He took out a gold pocket watch, checked the time, and instantly put on a cold expression. He didn't follow the script. This is his punishment. If he had gone to the vault just now, how could he have served the auras who were about to appear? By enough time. Chapter 234 Administrative Affairs Department. The British Ministry of Magic. Half an hour before the Gringotts robbery. Mr. Arthur Wearlie walked down the long corridor, and many of his colleagues greeted him enthusiastically along the way. He responded with an awkward smile and a nod, thinking back to when he was taken away for no apparent reason just 2 months ago. Colleagues who had heard of their correspondence with Mr. Hohenzollern were investigated on trumped-up charges they all tried to hide from me, but now, it is precisely because of this relationship. Feeling deeply moved that he could receive so much cheap kindness, He pushed open the door of his new department. Department of Administrative Services, Ministry of Magic, United Kingdom. This is a newly established department. I heard that it is the result of a transaction between Mr. Hohenzollern and Cornelius Fudge. The responsibilities of the new department are described very vaguely, but generally speaking, they are all encompassing. As long as it is the affairs of the British Ministry of Magic, this department has the right to manage it to some extent. It is said that this is the inspiration for the establishment of this department. It was a TV series or film that Mr. Hohenzollern had watched in the British Muggle world. And in this TV series, the current head of the department, Mr. Crouch, is also studying hard. But all this had nothing to do with Mr. Arthur, who had been transferred to this department as chief private secretary to old Mr. Crouch. I have been working in this new department for almost 2 months. My main work includes receiving documents, copying documents, and making a cup of coffee or tea. There was no other work to do, so after sitting down at his workstation, the first thing he did was to sort through his personal belongings. He took out a thick book, Elementary Views on the Combination of Magic and Machinery. This book was mailed to me by Mr. Hohenzollern a few days ago, and it has been there since the beginning of August. The magical boy had been keeping in close correspondence with him, and the other party seemed very curious about his idea of using magic to modify cars. He asked about a lot of details in this regard, and asked me to draw detailed drawings for him. During the last correspondence, I had this book sent to me by Owl, and a set of test questions was attached to the book. And a message was written. Dear Mr. Weirlie, I think I have formed a basic judgment about your technical capabilities through so many communications. Now, I hope you can study the contents of this book and apply them in the next 2 to 3 months. Completing the set of test questions that come with the book is very important to me, and it is also an important opportunity for the entire British wizarding community. If you have any work-related questions, you are always welcome to communicate with me, Karl Hohenzollern. The whole letter was filled with a commanding tone, but Mr. Arthur was not very disgusted. After all, he just glanced at the contents of the book. I was deeply attracted by the extremely profound and interesting combination of mechanical structure and magic. So much so that his main job every day at work now almost becomes sitting in the office reading and understanding this book. It's really something new that has never been seen before. A simple sigh brought Mr. Arthur, who was immersed in books, back to reality. He looked up and saw that old Mr. Crouch was standing beside him, holding a piece of draft paper on which he had drawn a pattern. Look at the mechanical structure above, as well as the magic spell instructions engraved with magic patterns on each part. His expression was a little complicated. When he saw Mr. Arthur noticed him, he waved the draft paper and tried to force a smile. I'm sorry to bother you while you're reading. I can no longer understand these things. I think this must be Mr. Hohenzollern. I want you to help him with the things he wants, including the book. Yes, sir. Mr. Arthur closed the book, stood up apologetically, and scratched his head. I'm sorry that I shouldn't have used my working hours to do these things, but I have to admit that the content of the book deeply attracted me. Many wizards in the British wizarding world today still think that muggles are inferior people who need to do everything by themselves, but they never imagined that with some simple gears, they could make the most ingenious things in the world. It was just brilliant to record the time and drive the car. When he said this, there was a gleam in Mr. Arthur's eyes. It seemed that he really liked everything he was studying now. Old Crouch looked at his personal secretary, nodded approvingly at first, and then sat aside with a sad face. If only everyone in the Ministry of Magic were like you, full of enthusiasm for life, full of confidence and desire for the unknown. I think the problem will be much easier to solve, and I won't have to deceive myself again and again in the face of a fact. Voldemort has returned. It is an indisputable fact that he is not dead. The European wizarding world is in turmoil. Grindelwald's heir suddenly appeared. We should have been more vigilant and at least prepared, but Cornelius Fudge has repeatedly refused to let me propose a proposal. He still doesn't understand why he lost so badly last time. Hearing these complaints about his own loss, Mr. Arthur shuddered all over. He quickly got up and walked to the back door, stuck his head out, and looked around in the corridor. After making sure that no one was there, he closed the door, even locked it, and walked to his workstation to make a cup of tea. Then he took the brewed tea and sat down next to old Crouch. While handing the tea to him, he whispered advice. "Mr. Crouch, this topic is still very sensitive. Sometimes it is better not to talk about it publicly. There are rumors all over the Ministry of Magic right now, saying that our Administrative Affairs Department has taken over the responsibilities of all departments. You have actually sidelined the minister. If you make such remarks again, it will inevitably be exploited by some people with ulterior motives. We've only had 2 months of peace. There's no need to make things so tense." Old Crucy took the tea and said with disdain, "I'm not in the mood to fight for power with these people. I'm just doing my job. It's because they are too inefficient. A simple problem can even take a week to solve. I just took all the things that they had accumulated for a long time and dealt with them all at my own pace. Everything I do is only for the development of the British wizarding world. Of course, I personally believe this very much," Mr. Arthur affirmed sincerely. But he couldn't help feeling helpless. After 2 months of getting along with each other, he was convinced that this thin-looking old man, everything he did was really just as he said, just for the development of the British wizarding world. But sometimes in a work environment, how the work is done does not depend on what you think, but on what other people think. It was obvious that other people in the Ministry of Magic did not believe that the old man could be so selfless. They preferred to maliciously speculate that it was just a means to fight for power. Chapter 235. Whose Trap? Magic can change many things, but the fact that can never be changed is that wizards who possess magic are just a group of mediocre humans. Mr. Arthur couldn't help but recall a passage in the correspondence between the young man and himself. The other party seems to like writing this kind of language very much. Sometimes it is written intentionally for the ending, and sometimes it is interspersed in the conversation of letters. When Mr. Arthur first saw these words, he just felt that Mr. Hohenzollern was still very young. He likes to write some literary words, but when the facts come before him, these words will unconsciously emerge in his mind. "Well, I've said so much, there's no point in saying more." Just as Mr. Arthur fell into his memories again, old Crouch had finished his tea. He patted the other person's shoulder, stood up, and spoke seriously. "Organize all the documents that were delivered and place them on my desk for the next 2.5 hours. I need to concentrate on my work. Please call me 1 hour before the end of the get off workday so that I can revise the content of the proposal. Submit it for review tomorrow." "You're still not going to give up, Mr. Arthur," who had come to his senses, blurted out and asked, "What do you think, Mr. Weirlie?" Old Crouch gave a rare smile. He said calmly as he walked towards his office, "I gave up my life for 11 years. Do you think I will ever look back?" After saying this, old Crouch turned his head slightly and looked at Mr. Arthur, who was standing still. The two smiled at each other and were about to get down to work. There was a fierce knock on the locked door and a hurried shout, "Open the door quickly, open the door quickly, there is important information to report." Mr. Arthur looked at his leader nervously. It was obvious that he was afraid that their conversation would be overheard by someone with ulterior motives. Old Crouch gestured to everyone not to panic and went over to open the door himself. As soon as the door opened, a young man fell directly into the room. Before Mr. Arthur could help him up, he jumped up and waved the paper in his hand and shouted loudly, "Oh no, something terrible has happened. Just now, a dark wizard who calls himself Peter Pettigrew, known as the 3rd generation Dark Lord, appeared, carried out a robbery at Gringotts with a strange set of weapons. Impossible. When did it happen? Have we investigated the weapon used? Are there any accomplices in the crime? Are there any casualties at the scene?" Mr. Arthur and old Cratchit spoke almost in unison. However, what the two people said were completely different. Mr. Arthur himself denied the news he had heard. Old Crouch didn't care whether the news was true or not and started asking for details according to the standard of case handling. The young man who was asked about the details took several deep breaths. I don't know if there are any accomplices in the crime. All the wizards who witnessed the crime said they didn't recognize the weapon used, but the person who came to report the crime was an American who had just immigrated to the British wizarding world. He stated that he had seen the robber in Gringotts with his own eyes, and he witnessed the other party's weapon up close. He said it was a weapon from the Muggle world, called a Thompson submachine gun. I don't know what the weapon looked like, but the other party specifically emphasized that the robber was very polite and gentlemanly. But there were also wizards at the scene who said that the other party used Avada Kedavra and killed a wizard in the leaky cauldron. What the hell is this? Old Crouch looked displeased and criticized loudly. Weapons from the Muggle world, being able to break into Gringotts without an accomplice, and being polite and courteous to hostages and their gentlemen. Yet he can use the Avada Kedavra curse at will and kill an innocent wizard. Don't you think that the information you are talking about shouldn't appear on a person at all? Have the auras from the law enforcement department set out? Is there anyone on the scene to control the situation so that it does not get out of control? Hearing this question, the young man was obviously a little guilty and didn't dare to look up at Old Crouch. This behavior immediately angered the hot-tempered old man. The other party slapped the young man in the face and roared in anger. Don't tell me that such a serious situation has occurred and not a single aura has rushed to the scene yet, and you are not going to report to the minister. What are you doing in the administrative affairs department? What do you want to do? The young man who was slapped in the face covered his right cheek with his hand with a look of helplessness. He said it with tears in his eyes. Mr. Barty Crouch, I'm only here to pass on a message. Mr. Cornelius Fudge is not at his post. Many of the auras from the Department of Magical Enforcement have been seconded to the French Ministry of Magic. Now there are only 10 auras still on duty, so according to the management authority of the Administrative Affairs Department, I came to you, hoping that you can come out and take charge of the situation and resolve this tense crisis. You must ask the head of the Aura Department to come see me immediately. Everyone, activate the level 1 emergency plan. Everyone, rush to the scene. All of them? The young man looked at Old Crouch in surprise. But according to the regulations, in the event of an emergency like this, the auras should first protect the British Ministry of Magic. If all the auras are sent out, who will guarantee the safety of the British Ministry of Magic? I told you everything. Old Crouch stared at the young man in front of him, with one hand raised high. Seeing this scene, the young man covered his face and shouted as he walked towards the door. No problem, Mr. Barty Crutcher. I'll notify them to gather now. No need to see me off. Bye. Having said that, he disappeared in a flash. Only Old Crouch and Arthur Weasley were left in the room. Old Crouch looked at the other party and gave a direct order. During my absence, you will serve as the chief private secretary to the Minister of Administrative Affairs. Manage the entire British Ministry of Magic on behalf of you. Me. Mr. Arthur pointed at himself with his left index finger, a completely confused expression on his face. Yes, that's you. Old Crouch seemed not to want to waste time talking to him. He casually found a piece of white paper, quickly wrote the order, and signed his name. He picked up the wand and walked towards the door. As soon as he stepped out of the threshold, he heard Mr. Arthur's anxious call from behind. You can't go, Mr. Crouch. This is obviously a trap. They want to take advantage of this incident. You will be embarrassed if you come. I know, Old Crouch said calmly with his back to Arthur, but sometimes the prey and the hunter can switch roles. Who knows who set the trap for whom? Chapter 236 Classical Robbery. Drink a cup of hot coffee, ma'am. It's a great help in relieving pain and soothing the soul. 5 minutes after the hostages were released, in the lobby of the first savings bank in the wizarding world opposite Gringotts, it was filled with people watching the excitement, and half of the wizards in Diagon Alley were gathered here. Through the transparent glass door, I stared closely at the white building opposite. Grindelwald, who has transformed into an alt rosier again, provides warm service to these wizards who come to watch the fun as the CEO of the bank point. Not only did he stop the service staff in an attempt to drive these people away, he also asked them to get the snacks and drinks that had been prepared. Point take good care of these panicked people, of course, provided they have savings or business dealings here. Point as for the wizards who stored their wealth in Gringotts, he explained it this way: as the first savings bank in the magic world, we will always serve our customers wholeheartedly and protect the safety of their wealth. We will better protect the personal safety of our customers, and you can enjoy the best service here. But the premise of all this is that you must become our customer. After that, a group of wizards wearing full sets of Muggle special operations equipment, holding explosion-proof shields and short-range submachine guns, appeared. Point those wizards who were not customers were driven out of the building, and barbed wire and makeshift explosion-proof walls were quickly erected around the perimeter. So in just 5 minutes, a very strange scene appeared in the entire Diagon Alley. Point in a bright and modern building, a group of wizards sat together listening to the hostage who had just been released telling what had just happened inside Gringotts. While eating snacks and drinking coffee, you can also listen to people gossiping on the spot. The outside of the building is guarded by armed personnel. Point the barbed wire that gleams coldly in the sun and the thick explosion-proof walls give a sense of security at first glance. Point outside the barbed wire and explosion-proof wall, another group of wizards were as anxious as ants on a hot pan. Point he stared nervously at the white building opposite, listening to the constant gunfire and wailing coming from inside, his expression becoming increasingly uglier. The wizards in the British magical world had never encountered such an incident and were completely at a loss for what to do. For a moment, Point the accumulated emotions began to ferment into complaints under the scorching Sunday. Why haven't the auras from the Ministry of Magic arrived yet? All my possessions are stored in Gringotts. My child will go to Hogwarts tomorrow. I'm here to collect the tuition fee today. Those goblins deserve to die. They said Gringotts is the safest place. That's bullshit. They don't have any countermeasures at all. The crowd gradually began to riot, and a few brave wizards even wanted to rush into Gringotts. At this moment, Old Crouch arrived at the scene with the remaining 10 auras. Mr. Crouch, you are finally here. There is no time to say anything more now. Go and stop the Dark Wizard. Why did you come so late? What can you do with just a few of you? Look for yourselves. The security guards at the bank behind you are more numerous than you and appear to be more professional. Anxious, please, angry rebukes, all kinds of voices mixed together, making it impossible for Old Crouch to hear what these people were saying. Point as a last resort, Old Crouch took out his wand, pointed it at his throat and cast a spell. The sound is loud. Please calm down, gentlemen and ladies, and speak slowly one by one about the weapons used by the other side and whether powerful black magic was used. The more information you provide, the easier it will be to resolve this matter. The likelihood that your wealth will be preserved will be increased. Otherwise, please register your name here and go to the Administrative Affairs Department tomorrow to collect your bankruptcy compensation. Old Crouch's tough attitude gradually calmed the tumultuous crowd, and people looked at each other. There was silence for a long time, but no one reported any useful information to Old Crouch. Is there no one who can provide any information? Old Crouch had a headache. Excuse me, Mr. Barty Crouch. I think most of us don't recognize the weapon used by the Dark Wizard. Some say he was holding a Muggle weapon called a submachine gun, something that could break open the door to Gringotts. Many of us really don't recognize it. I just remember it was a dark green object similar to clay. The Dark Wizard stuck it around the gate and ignited it with a white fuse. There was a violent explosion. The door that couldn't be opened by magic just fell straight to the ground. After a long silence, a male wizard finally came out and spoke. At the same time as he was speaking, everyone suddenly felt a series of vibrations coming from the soles of their feet. A series of dull explosions were heard from Gringotts in the basement vault of Gringotts. Peter Pettigrew looked at the goblin lying on the ground in shock and squatted down slightly. He looked at the huge eyes that were disproportionate to the head and said with disdain, "Now, you still think I need to make a deal with a dirty guy like you?" Boom. 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 Behind Explosions occurred one after another in the vault bunker that was as complex as a mine. Orange flames ignited at the doors of each vault, and shockwaves echoed throughout the underground fortress. Just a minute ago, Peter Pettigrew was riding on a roller coaster like car led by the goblin. We arrived at a cliff at the edge of the underground vault, which is a stone protrusion in the entire underground vault. This was not the location of any family vault, and it was obvious that the goblin had brought him here with ill intentions. The fact was just as he expected. As soon as this greedy ugly guy got off the car, he rubbed his hands and spoke in a semi-threatening tone. "Dear Dark Lord, I can take you to every vault in Gringotts, but I also hope that my loyalty will be rewarded by you. You know that I have done something like this, and it is impossible for me to be accepted by the goblin community, so I hope that I can get a suitable reward for leading the way." Faced with this blatant threat, Peter Pettigrew was so angry that he laughed, knowing that he was here to rob. I didn't expect the other party's train of thought to be so strange. I robbed Gringotts, and it robbed me in return. Such a fresh and unconventional train of thought will certainly be rewarded with an accurate and fierce attack with the butt of a gun. Peter Pettigrew used the butt of his gun to knock the ugly guy to the ground, and then he looked at him with fear. He pulled out 2 huge mountaineering bags out of thin air, threw them on the ground, and then snapped his fingers. The zipper of the shoulder bag opened automatically, and countless C4 explosives with fuses already tied flew in an orderly manner in front of every door of the underground vault. Tightly attached to every corner of the vault doors of major families. Peter Pettigrew stepped on the goblin's face with his right foot and took out the detonator under the other's gaze. "You may have been confused by my actions since entering Gringotts. I'm not a muggle. I'm a wizard. I can use magic. Your threats are meaningless to me." With that, the fireworks display began. Chapter 237 Dragon Roars. Countless C4 bricks of explosives were detonated one after another, representing the hard work of generations of magical craftsmen at Gringotts. The vault door that could defend against many kinds of dark magic was thus destroyed by Peter Pettigrew's massive attack of explosives. Everything turned into a joke and a pile of powder. Countless gold galleons that had been sealed for many years were thrown high into the sky by the impact of the explosion. A moment later, the entire bunker was filled with the sound of money raining down. One after another, the glittering gold galleons hit the protruding parts of the cliffs, making pleasant sounds. Peter Pettigrew stood on the edge of the protruding rock with his arms open, as if he was enjoying the beautiful music. Behind him, the little goblin, with half of his face covered with shoe prints, sat on the ground with despair in his eyes, looking at everything happening in front of him. He kept muttering to himself, "Impossible, impossible, I must be dreaming, I must be dreaming." The soft whisper gradually turned into a loud roar until a loud slap knocked the ugly guy to the ground. Peter Pettigrew shook his aching left hand and frantically kicked the goblin that had collapsed on the ground. While roaring angrily, "What's impossible? Times have changed, you despicable idiots. Don't yell at me when I'm having the happiest time, otherwise I could still shoot you away." The goblin, who was curled up in the corner and enduring the brutal beating from the other party, seemed to be a little mentally broken at this time. Yelled madly, "You are finished. You have robbed the entire British wizarding world of its wealth. You will be hunted down by wizards from all over the world. The auras from the Ministry of Magic must be waiting for you outside. Even if you open these vaults, you won't be able to take away even a single galleon." "Oh, is that so?" Peter Pettigrew stopped what he was doing and looked at the goblin, who had fallen into madness pretending to be thoughtful. He spoke in a tone of sudden enlightenment. "Your words do remind me, although I don't agree with the first half of your sentence, but the auras from the Ministry of Magic may indeed be waiting for me outside. I must find a way to leave." As he spoke, he looked down at his feet. In the deepest part of the bunker, a huge pale figure was tightly imprisoned there. "There is a way." Peter Pettigrew pointed at the figure excitedly and looked at the goblin with joy on his face. "Thank you so much. Not only did you help me withdraw the money, but you also thoughtfully prepared a getaway car for me." Gringotts' service is indeed as good as its reputation. I must give you a high compliment. After saying this, under the goblin's horrified gaze, Peter Pettigrew first used magic to gather the gold galleons scattered throughout the bunker. All were packed into the 2 open backpacks, and numerous gold coins were pulled by magic. They converged into 2 golden streams, flowing from bottom to top like a backward waterfall, and automatically flew into the 2 mountaineering bags. The whole process did not last too long. The 2 backpacks seemed to have limited capacity. After only half of the gold coins in the bunker were put in, they were basically full. Your fee. Peter Pettigrew took out a gold galleon from his backpack and threw it in front of the goblin. Then he hung the 2 backpacks on his body and tied them up, walked to the edge of the huge rock protrusion, opened his arms, and jumped directly. As the figure gradually approached, Peter Pettigrew took out a detonator for C4 explosives in the air with a light pinch. The C4 explosives that had been stuck to the dragon chain of the cranian iron belly were removed. They were all detonated directly, and the huge explosion tore the black chains into pieces. The broken iron rings scratched the dragon's skin like bullets. The dragon was beaten until it was covered in blood, and the injured dragon let out a long roar towards the sky. It flapped its huge wings and used its hands and feet to crawl towards the sky. In the process of crawling, it just happened to catch the falling Peter Pettigrew. He grasped the dragon's wound with one hand and hung himself on the dragon's back, an action that only exacerbated the dragon's pain. This made him crawl faster and faster on the other side. Outside Gringotts, the ground stopped shaking and everyone was urging them to do it. Under such circumstances, Old Crouch could only urgently urge the Aurors to move towards Gringotts, but just as the 10 Aurors took a few steps, they felt a violent vibration under their feet. Suddenly, a terrifying roar was heard from deep within Gringotts, where the door was open. Everyone, get down. As soon as the roar stopped, Old Crouch shouted loudly, commanding the wizards and Aurors who were still watching to get down quickly. Just as they lay on the ground, a huge ball of orange-yellow flame directly overturned the roof of Gringotts. Countless smoke, dust, and rocks fell from the sky, and when everyone looked up, the scene before him was simply indescribable. Old Crouch, with his face covered in dust, looked at the monster entrenched on the roof of Gringotts. He asked the others in an incredulous tone, "Am I just too old? Is that a giant dragon, a full-grown cranian iron belly, Mr. Barty Crouch? I don't want my money anymore. Please keep me safe." The wizard who was questioned looked in the direction of the other party's finger, his body shaking like a sieve, and the fear in his words was beyond words. Even the wizards hiding in the first savings bank in the wizarding world began to get agitated, and people looked at the scene in front of them in horror. A fire dragon rushing out from underground. Look at that dark shadow. That dark wizard can actually control a fire dragon. The crowd began to shout uncontrollably and rioted. The wizard screamed and pushed desperately towards the gate until a figure blocked their way. "Please, rest assured, as long as you are our customers, you are absolutely safe in this building. I guarantee it with my life. Please go back and enjoy your snacks and drinks. There is no need to panic. Get out of the way." The rioting crowd was completely unwilling to listen to these words. You have to know that it was a fire dragon, a fully grown cranian iron belly. This dragon, the largest in the wizarding world, might not be controllable even by 20 elite Aurors. The earth-shaking roar awakened the deepest fear in people's hearts. No matter how Mr. Renault dissuaded them, the frightened crowd still tried to leave on their own, and some people were ready to use magic to apparate to leave. But he found that spells could not be used in this building. This time, the fear turned into anger and began to be vented towards Mr. Renault. But he remained calm and elegant. He said, while looking at his hands with a smile on his face, "Don't worry. To ensure the safety of your funds, magic is prohibited in this building, but you don't have to worry about your safety at all. I said that, as long as you don't leave, you will always be safe." While he was speaking, the dark wizard riding on the fire dragon cast magic in the air. After saying a few words, "Dark Lord Peter Pettigrew," he turned into a puff of black smoke and disappeared without a trace. The dragon lost control and immediately flew towards the crowd, but as soon as it approached the building, balls of deadly flames magically exploded on its body. Chapter 238 Dumbledore Such. Walking on the road leading to Dumbledore's old house, Dumbledore's mood was extremely bad. Just an hour ago, a shocking event occurred in the British wizarding world. Gringotts, which was known as the safest place in the British wizarding world, was robbed. Not only did the other party brutally kill all the goblins in Gringotts, they also stole half of the wealth in Gringotts' underground vault. In the end, he even released the Ukrainian iron belly fire dragon that was imprisoned in the basement of Gringotts to guard the safety of the vault. When the huge fire dragon broke through the roof and roared at everyone, many wizards who were present at the scene. Everyone subconsciously thought that Diagon Alley, the most prosperous commercial street in the British wizarding world, would be reduced to ashes under the flames of the dragon. But what no one expected was that the fire dragon just crossed the center of the road and made a gesture to attack the building of the first savings bank in the magical world. On the transparent glass exterior wall of the building, there suddenly appeared more than a dozen Orion integrated missile and artillery air defense systems commonly used by the Russian Navy in the Muggle world. 36 anti-aircraft missiles, plus 3,000 20mm caliber armor-piercing incendiary bombs. The adult Ukrainian iron belly was directly shot into a sieve, and the entire fire dragon's skin was blown to pieces by the missile. The bullets, weighing several tons, directly smashed the huge dragon head into pieces. A bloody rain suddenly fell at the scene, and the wizards standing outside watching the excitement were covered in the hot and smelly dragon blood. It is said that everyone stood there in a daze for a full 5 minutes until the auras from the Ministry of Magic began to evacuate the crowd. But the impact caused is not expected to disappear as the crowd leaves. What on earth do these two bastards want to do? What did I do wrong in my past life to have to deal with these two troublemakers? Walking on the cobblestone path, Dumbledore couldn't help but complain. Countless wizards along the way greeted the great headmaster, but received no response. All the wizards passing by felt this old man, whose hair is dyed like a rainbow, and who appears to be very approachable on weekdays, is now on the verge of going berserk. The pair of eyes hidden behind the half-moon lenses looked like a dragon about to breathe fire. Soon Dumbledore arrived at the door of his old house. It was called an old house, but the building in front of him obviously did not fit the description of this term. The two-story villa is covered with bright white tiles and the courtyard is surrounded by a golden metal fence. There were fragrant blue tulips planted inside. The automatic sprinkler system was still working, and the courtyard was full of little rainbows under the sunlight. Walking into the room, the quaint wooden building that was full of the charm of time has long disappeared without a trace. The luxurious and noble mahogany furniture, combined with the modernist duplex decoration, gives people an elegant and modern feeling. But the most eye-catching thing is the two full black mountaineering bags on the table in the living room. The open zipper was shining with golden light, and you didn't have to guess that it was filled with gold galleons. Isn't this already a betrayal? Looking at the two backpacks, Dumbledore's eyes twitched wildly, and he covered his chest with one hand and gasped heavily. Although he had already guessed the truth in his heart, when he saw the evidence was placed in his home like this, no parent could accept it so easily. He took 2 deep breaths and took out a box of medicine from his pocket. This thing was sent to him in advance by Karl when he went traveling during the summer vacation. It was some prescription medicine from the Muggle world. Along with the medicine came a note that read, "Here are some medications to prevent diabetes and lower blood pressure. I know you're with that person. I can also roughly guess your way of entertainment, which is nothing more than making cakes and various desserts together. I have renovated the old house you blew up. It now has a full set of tableau and dessert making books from all over the world. No need to thank me. Remember to take your medicine on time. As my backer, you cannot die before I rule the entire wizarding world." When Dumbledore saw that text, he almost fainted on the spot due to high blood pressure. But now it seems that this guy had planned it all along, and these medicines were probably prepared for this moment. After taking the medicine and resting for a while, Dumbledore felt that his blood pressure had finally dropped a little. So he immediately took out his wand, strode towards the second floor, and recited silently in his heart, "Karl Hohenzollern, you are done for today." As soon as he reached the door of the other person's bedroom, Dumbledore suddenly braked, because he heard some wrong sounds coming from the room. "Pay attention to your waist, Mr. Diggory. Tighten your abdomen and buttocks. Use your abdominal muscles to exert force, instead of using your damn ass. How can you be So dumb that you can't even do this kind of exercise. Stop it immediately. You are not allowed to do such dirty things in the room. The bedroom door was kicked open from the outside, and an angry Dumbledore looked into the room nervously. But only Karl and Cedric were seen, looking at the old man standing stupidly at the door with puzzled expressions. There was nothing dirty happening in the room. Two boys, wearing thin white vests, were lying on yoga mats doing core exercises. What's the matter, Principal? Karl obviously couldn't give a good face to Dumbledore, who suddenly broke into his bedroom without even knocking on the door. A pair of blue eyes stared at each other closely, their eyes full of scrutiny. Happy holidays, Headmaster Dumbledore. I haven't seen you for a long time. In the past few months when you disappeared. Are you studying some advanced magic? There are many malicious speculations about you in the wizarding world, but Hufflepuff students will always support you. Cedric greeted Dumbledore warmly, his words full of sincerity. These words should have been very touching to hear, but the two boys' questions made Dumbledore, who was standing at the door, extremely embarrassed. Even more embarrassing was what Karl said next. He stood up from the yoga mat sweating profusely. He glared at Cedric and said in an unquestionable tone, "Don't think about being lazy. Don't think I don't know that you greeted this old man just to buy a few minutes of time to be lazy. You still have 6 sets of moves to complete. Even if this house is blown up by this old man again tonight, you have to do all the exercise before you can go, too." As he spoke, Karl pointed his finger at Dumbledore again and spoke in a teasing tone. "But one point in what you just said is actually true from some perspectives. In the past few months, our dear headmaster has indeed been studying some mysterious magic. The power of that magic is so strong, it can directly protect the entire European wizarding world from the destruction of the second generation of the Dark Lord. Am I right, dear Principal?" If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 239, Helpless Dumbledore. Is there such a magical magic? After listening to Karl's explanation, Cedric suddenly shouted excitedly, and his eyes turned into stars when he looked at Dumbledore. The feelings of admiration and curiosity were palpable. This one being stared at with such admiring eyes by his own student. Dumbledore suddenly became so nervous that he broke out in a sweat and stammered for a long time without being able to utter a word. Seeing this scene, Karl, who was standing by, immediately showed his signature smirk and spoke slowly. "The Principal may have overcomplicated the matter and may want to explain it to you from an academic professional perspective. It's actually not that complicated at all. I can explain it to you again. The magic is very simple. It comes from the purest human emotion, which is, shut up." Just as that word was about to be uttered, a roar echoed throughout the bedroom. The powerful magic of the top wizard was fully demonstrated at this moment, and Cole was frightened by this sudden anger. He looked at Dumbledore somewhat awkwardly. "It seems that I have said too much. It is better to wait for the principal to personally announce such advanced magic. Come out." Dumbledore had a dark face and pointed at the corridor outside the door. A terrifying aura emanated from his whole body. Karl looked at Dumbledore, who was on the verge of going berserk and couldn't help swallowing his saliva, then turned to look at Cedric. But I found that this fool was looking to the left at the angry Dumbledore like a curious Teletubbies looking at Karl on the right, who was standing there in a daze. He seemed to be completely unaware of the awkward atmosphere. Seeing that there was no hope in trying to adjust the atmosphere through this guy, Karl could only follow Dumbledore helplessly. I closed the door and went downstairs to the living room. "Tell me, where did these 2 bags of gold coins come from?" As soon as they got downstairs, Dumbledore took the lead and pointed at the 2 mountaineering bags on the table and roared angrily, "I don't know. Don't ask me, Karl." denied it 3 times in a row, slowly sat down on the chair next to the table, took out a gold galleon from his backpack, and played with it in his hand. The glittering gold coins danced flexibly between his fingers, just like Karl's eloquent words. I slept in this house until the afternoon. Just a few minutes ago, a short fat man with a wretched face came in. He came to this house with these 2 bags, saying that he wanted to present them to his dearest principal. When I heard it was a gift for you, I had no intention of refusing it, so I just let him put it casually on the table in the living room. Any questions? What's the problem? Dumbledore was so angry about this that his blood pressure rose again, and the finger pointing at Cole was trembling a little. You've gone too far, Mr. Hohenzollern. You robbed Gringotts in broad daylight and even used violence to kill countless lives. You have violated the oath you once made. Watch your words. Cole played with the gold coins with his signature smirk on his face. I didn't rob Gringotts. As far as I know, the person who robbed Gringotts was Peter Pettigrew. He even left his name before he left. It's really sad that you use such a vicious mentality to speculate about your own children, my dear mother. What did you say? Dumbledore was completely furious. Who told you how you address me? Does it matter who it is? Karl still had a smile on his face as he threw the gold galleon in his hand back into his backpack. Then he pushed 2 bags of heavy gold coins in front of the other party. It doesn't matter if you don't want to acknowledge my name. I already know it anyway. It's all I want to know. As for your desire for another title, that may require some price. After all, the owner of that title. But it cost a lot of money. Of course, I believe you have the financial resources. For example, these 2 bags of gold coins are enough. Enough. Dumbledore slammed the table angrily and pointed at the 2 black mountaineering bags. This dirty money has no place in this room and must be returned to its rightful owners. Of course. Karl's face was honest, and he didn't have any intention of trying to keep her. He pointed at the 2 bags of gold coins and spoke in a firm tone. I just didn't know at first that the short fat man was Peter Pettigrew. Otherwise I would never allow him to bring such dirty money into this house. Now that the situation has been clarified, this ill-gotten gains should of course be returned to its original owner, but considering that I'm a minor, this mistake may not even be considered illegal, but I don't have the right to proceed with the next step. You are the only adult man in this house, so please return the money to the owners. Hearing what Karl said, Dumbledore's expression finally looked better, but he had just reached out for the 2 backpacks. Suddenly, as if he had thought of something, he stopped his hand in midair, looked at Cole with a puzzled look, and asked half doubtfully, you sure you want to return the money? You won't stop it? What kind of words are these? They are very hurtful to people's feelings. Karl yelled angrily, and the grief and anger on his face moved everyone who saw it. He said righteously, returning stolen property is a virtue that a good student of Hogwarts should have, but it is also a virtue that a good student of Hogwarts should have as well as your child. I have to warn you again. A powerful dark wizard suddenly appeared and robbed Gringotts, which is known as the safest place. It seems very unreasonable that the stolen money appeared in your house out of nowhere. If the money is taken out now and made public, it may cause your excellent reputation to be challenged, or even considered as an accomplice. Accomplice, Dumbledore screamed uncontrollably. This is slander, total slander, and no one should think this way. Of course. Karl began to perform comforting, speaking in a tone that showed consideration for the other person. No one should think so, but in the previous incidents, your reputation has been subjected to some unwarranted accusations. There's an old saying in the eastern countries, it's easy to dodge an open spear, but hard to guard against an arrow from the dark. You never know if someone will take advantage of this situation, and then you'll end up with something bad with good intentions. Thus looking at the 2 black mountaineering bags, Dumbledore had already guessed that the boy said this just to keep the 2 bags of gold coins, but he had to admit that what the other party said made sense, and the 2 bags of money had become a hot potato. If he doesn't hand it over, it will be very troublesome. If he hands it over, it will be even more troublesome. Thinking about this, Dumbledore was extremely depressed. He could only stare at Carol and speak in a blaming tone. Then, you shouldn't kill people. Even if you don't recognize that the lives of those goblins are lives. What about the innocent person in the leaky cauldron? He is just an ordinary wizard who is about to get married and have his own family. You are going too far. I must stress again that I have not left this house. Karl's expression was serious as he took out a bottle of reddish-brown potion from 2 black mountaineering bags. He placed the medicines on the table and spoke in a calm tone. When the fat man came, he specifically said that he did not kill the wizard. The killing curse was just a disguised sleeping spell. It just needs a special potion to remove it. The potion is here now. Chapter 240 The reason for leaving half of the wealth. Looking at the bottle of reddish-brown potion, Dumbledore's old face was full of black lines, and he kept cursing in his heart. You said it wasn't you who did it, and you've even thought of the aftermath. But even if he thought so, in reality he could only remain silent and look at Karl, who was smiling with a weird look. Karl looked at the time on his watch, thought for a moment, then opened his hands and spoke very calmly. Looking at your silence, it's obvious that you don't want to believe what I just said. Well, let's make an assumption. I am the murderer of this robbery. Do you have anything to ask me? Please note that I'm talking about hypotheses. Please don't get too involved in the role and pay attention to your critical thinking ability. It seems you are still unwilling to admit it. Dumbledore took a deep breath, still with a hint of anger on his face. Then, the first question I want to ask is, why do you resort to violence so recklessly? Which aspect are you talking about? Karl also got into the role. He changed his voice and spoke in a low and obscene voice. If you mean the injury to the wizard in the leaky cauldron, then I can only say it was caused by a moment of anger. After all, no one likes to be laughed at after a grand introduction, instead of receiving applause. If you said that you killed the goblins with guns, the reason is a little more complicated. The root cause is hard to explain, and I don't think you have the time to listen. I can tell you the direct reason. It's very simple. It's because those fairies are too ugly. No matter their appearance or character, they are too ugly and mean. I have no psychological burden to kill them. What? Dumbledore screamed out of control, staring at Karl and roaring. You can't have this kind of thinking, kid. Excessive pursuit of violence and power will lead you astray in life. Tom was because why he became Voldemort in the past has nothing to do with me. Carol continued to answer calmly, his voice still low and obscene, and his expression was somewhat playful. It was hard to figure out for a moment whether the person who answered this question was Karl Hohenzollern or Peter Pettigrew. Dumbledore was a little dazed for a moment, then he calmed himself down and muttered to himself, as if to comfort himself, killing and violence cannot solve problems, child. When I was young, I also worshipped power, but it ultimately brought only infinite pain. Killing and violence really can't solve the problem. Karl agreed, but then he suddenly changed the subject and raised his voice. But it solves the problem for the person who asked it, doesn't it? Dumbledore was silent for a long time, no longer dwelling on this issue, nor did he try to correct the mistakes in the other party's words. Instead, he asked again, since we cannot reach a consensus on the previous point, let's not discuss this issue for now. My second question is, since you have already robbed Gringotts, why did you only take half of the treasure in the underground vault? Could it be that during the robbery, your conscience suddenly came to your senses? What are you talking about? Carol's low and obscene voice became a little angry. You said that, as if I'm not a good person. I have my own conscience, but you just can't understand it. Even though I robbed Gringotts' bank, killed all the goblins working inside, released a dragon and nearly reduced the entire street to ashes, but I think I'm a good person. As for your question just now, it can also be divided into direct causes and root causes. The direct reason is very simple. You saw the 2 mountaineering bags on the table. They were full and there was no more space. It's that simple. What's the root cause? Dumbledore's hopes were dashed once again. He felt a little cerebral congestion, but he still insisted on asking. Carol had no intention of hiding anything, and continued to speak in his low and obscene voice. The underlying reasons are somewhat complicated, and it involves a study of human nature. To put it simply, if all the wealth in Gringotts' underground vault was taken away at once, then those wizards who lost their wealth would be the ones who lost their wealth, and the remaining fairies will unite together to hunt me down to the ends of the earth, which will undoubtedly be very disadvantageous, but leaving one behind is a very different situation. You all know that I left behind half of my wealth, but what you don't know is that this half of the wealth was not plundered evenly. I only took a little bit of the wealth of some wizards. I had plundered almost all of the wealth of some families. This inequality will lead to a big problem in how to distribute the remaining half of the wealth. At this point, Karl deliberately paused. He took out a set of tea sets and used a kettle to fill 2 large covered bowls halfway with water. Then he took out 10 small teacups and placed them next to the 2 covered bowls and pulled a large covered bowl in front of him, pointing to the remaining 10 small teacups and the other large covered bowl. He said in a joking tone, "Originally, this pot of tea was just enough to count down 10 cups of tea, but now half of the tea has been taken away by a man with strong wrists and a very dangerous factor. So what will happen? Those 10 tea drinkers will not think of uniting to fight for the half pot of tea, because the risk factor is too high. Their attention will be drawn to the remaining half pot of tea. Try to pour as much of the remaining half pot of tea into your own bowl as possible. Do you understand, dear principal? Only by keeping half of the wealth can we ensure that the other half of the wealth that was robbed can actually fall into our own pockets." It's really an eye-opener, Mr. Hohenzollern, Dumbledore praised with a wry smile, and the look in his eyes as he looked at the boy in front of him seemed to have changed his emotion in an instant. He had to admit that in the past year, he was a little afraid that Cole would develop in the direction of Voldemort or Grindelwald. The fragile British wizarding world could no longer withstand the birth of another Dark Lord. But now it seems that, just as this kid had told him long ago, nothing about Voldemort is worthy of mention in his eyes. This kid is far worse than Voldemort, who attempted to rule the British wizarding world with an outward appearance of violence and fear. This kid's sunny smile and gentle words are enough to make everyone fall into his trap. It's all Gale's fault. This old man must have the wrong genes, otherwise he wouldn't be such a kind person. How could such an evil creature be born? Chapter 241 Dumbledore surrenders. Just as Dumbledore was dissing Grindelwald madly in his heart, Karl, who was sitting next to him, looked at his watch again. "Dear Headmaster, I need to remind you that you don't have much time." "What are you talking about? Are you eager for me to try it sooner?" Dumbledore, who was already full of anger, immediately started shouting uncontrollably when he heard this, but Karl waved his hands repeatedly, indicating that he did not mean that, and spoke in an admonishing tone. "I definitely don't mean that. I've said that before I've completed my domination of the British wizarding world. As my biggest backer, I will do everything I can to ensure your survival. Now I'm still a long way from this goal. I said this just to remind you, if I'm not mistaken, of the wizard who fainted in the leaky cauldron. The so-called remains have been handed over to their family members, and if he is buried, or the body is cremated, then this potion may not be able to wake him up." "You wicked little devil." Dumbledore screamed out of control once again. For the first time in his life, that lasted for more than a century. There have never been so many gaffes like today. It turns out that the Grindelwald family is born to restrain the Dumbledore family. After cursing, Dumbledore picked up the potion on the table and rushed out the door impatiently. As a result, after taking just 2 steps, someone grabbed his sleeve from behind. "What do you want to do?" Dumbledore turned around and asked anxiously. "It's nothing serious," Karl said calmly. "What I say now is no longer hypothetical, but represents me personally. I want to remind you that you have to come back on time tonight and help me pack my clothes and prepare all the supplies for school." "Why?" Dumbledore asked puzzledly. "Why?" Karl raised his voice and blamed him bluntly. "How could you ask such a question? Aren't we a family? As the head of this family, today is the first day of school for me. Of course I want to enjoy the proper care from my parents like other children. Are you trying to deny it?" Okay, I'll help you when I come back." Dumbledore was anxious to leave, his tone full of perfunctory point. It was obvious that this perfunctory attitude would not satisfy Karl, and he still held Dumbledore's sleeve tightly. Pretending to have just remembered something, he continued speaking slowly. Oh, by the way, there is one more thing. When you go home, go to Diagon Alley to look for that gentleman first. He said he wants to go shopping with you to buy some ingredients for dinner tonight at 5:30 in the evening. You still have 2 hours left, which I think should be enough. I understand. I need to leave now as it concerns human lives. Dumbledore was so anxious that he was about to cry, and he tried desperately to pull his sleeves back. But an elderly and frail person obviously cannot compete with a young person who supervises others exercising every day. The old man and the young man were fighting madly in the living room, and finally Dumbledore couldn't stand it anymore. He raised his hands in surrender and looked at Karl and asked sincerely, "Mr. Hohenzollern, do you have anything else to say? If you have anything to say, please tell me now. I don't want to use violence in this room." "You still want to use violence?" Karl pretended to be scared, but his right hand still tightly grasped the other person's clothes. His eyes looked pitiful, but his words were still firm. The respected headmaster Dumbledore actually resorted to violence against his own ward, an underage boy. Is this a distortion of human nature, a loss of morality, or an inherent flaw in the Hogwarts education system? It really makes people reflect. Stop reflecting on this. Dumbledore was completely convinced and said in a pleading tone, "What exactly do you want to do? What result do you want to achieve?" Only after hearing this did Carol's expression finally look better, and his pair of blue eyes stared closely at the old man in front of him. "You just kicked open my bedroom door without any evidence and brought me to the living room to question me. You've accused me of a bunch of crimes that I didn't commit. Don't you have anything to explain, like an apology or something?" "Apologize?" Dumbledore became emotional again. "You just said so much, but you are still unwilling to admit it." "Admit what?" Cole was also very tough. "I just said that everything I just said was just an assumption. These are my own guesses from Peter Pettigrew's perspective. Can these words be used as evidence?" Okay, that's how you play it, right?" Dumbledore slammed the bottle of Scarlet Potion on the table. "Then how do you explain this? The money was in the bag when it was delivered, and the other party told me the effect. You always knew that I have a good memory," Karl explained without any panic. "What about the theory about human nature? If it wasn't planned in advance, how could there be such a deep understanding?" Dumbledore didn't want to give up yet. "I also have to thank the president and professors for their education, which has given me a strong ability to analyze and memorize many theories. Plus, I usually like to read all kinds of books, so this is just a coincidence. If one merely makes an accurate assessment of the criminal's behavior, one can be considered an accomplice or a suspect. Then wouldn't all the criminal profilers and criminal psychology researchers in the Muggle world be dragged out and shot?" Karl was still confident. Dumbledore really had nothing to say. After being silent for a long time, he felt the urgency of the situation and could only speak reluctantly in a very low voice. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hohenzollern. I shouldn't have doubted you for no reason. I sincerely apologize to you." The sound is indeed a little quieter. Karl put his left hand to his ear and deliberately moved closer to the old man. After hearing the other party's apology, he pretended to be very generous and said, "But I still forgive you. After all, we are a family, and I still have some affection for you. Then I really want to thank you. I can go now." Dumbledore gritted his teeth and said. Hearing this, Carol quickly let go of the other person's clothes and made a gesture of invitation, but just when the other person just walked to the door, he spoke suddenly again. "Oh, right. Sorry, I just remembered that as a person who died in a case, that wizard died in the same case. He should be kept in the British Ministry of Magic now, awaiting dark magic testing by the Aura Department. At least he will not be at risk of being buried or cremated until tomorrow. Actually, you don't have to worry at all. You can go find that gentleman first. He needs your attention more." Hearing this, Dumbledore almost fell to the ground. Finally, he turned his head with difficulty and stared at Karl, who was smiling. "So, what are you going to do while I'm gone?" Faced with this question, Carol calmly walked towards the second floor. "You go to see someone who needs your attention, and of course I have to go to see someone who needs my attention." As he said that, he suddenly shouted loudly towards the second floor, "Mr. Cedric Diggory, if you dare to eat the half of the cake on the bedside table, you will suffer a lot today." Chapter 242. Exposed Heart. The man sitting opposite me was so gentle to everyone a year ago, but now his true colors have been revealed. I became a vampire who only knows how to exploit others and force them to do jobs they don't like. Cedric looked at Karl, who was sitting opposite him, thinking indignantly. Today is September 9th, the first day of school. They are now in the compartment of the Hogwarts train, preparing to return to school. Outside the window, the beautiful scenery of the Scottish plateau unfolds like a picture scroll, with vast meadows, rolling hills, crystal clear lakes and ancient castle ruins. Every place looks so natural and spectacular. When the train passes through the mountains, the peaks in the distance are shrouded in clouds and mist. It seems as if nature has deliberately covered this land with a mysterious veil. The sun poured in through the gaps in the clouds, illuminating the stream in the valley, and rippling golden light on the water surface was breathtakingly beautiful. The warmth shines into the box from the window, making the whole box seem unusually quiet and beautiful. Such a beautiful scenery. Cedric always thought that he was stimulated by such beautiful scenery. Karl might allow himself to have a cup of afternoon tea, eat a piece of cake, and go to school with a good mood accompanied by the beautiful scenery. However, he did not expect that the other party would not buy it at all. In such a beautiful scenery, he actually sat there reading a book. Oh no, he should be looking at the account book there. There is no trace of snacks on the small table between the two of them. Sometimes there are open photo albums and a pile of obscure reports. What are you daydreaming about? Have you completed the 2 requirements I requested? Don't you know that you are working now? Just as Cedric was complaining madly in his heart, Karl had put down the account book in his hand without knowing when. He looked at Cedric sideways with an unusually serious expression. Cedric was startled by this and quickly pushed his glasses up on his nose, lowering his head and placing his hands on the keyboard of his laptop. Said with pretending effort, "Right away, but the software you requested is extremely difficult, and you didn't tell me that this job would be so boring." Cedric said this because he felt that he had been deceived again. About 2 weeks ago. Karl suddenly sent him a letter via OWL, and a book was attached to the letter. The application of magic in digital programming. The content of this book is obscure and difficult to understand, and it is a strange language overall. The other party assured in the letter that if he learned the language, he would be able to use an electronic device called a computer to program. Create wonderful programs, such as navigating vehicles on the road or sharing your daily life in a virtual space called the internet. At the end of the letter, he wrote, "You have seen the darkest misery in this world, but you have also discovered that those who suffer do not seem to have the upper hand in public opinion. Learn this language and you have the opportunity to change all of this." Under such verbal stimulation, Cedric worked day and night and learned these languages in just half a month. Then began his miserable life without any grand vision or beautiful wish for world peace. It's all shit. The only feeling he has now is that Carol is using him like a beast of burden. This guy kept making all kinds of unreasonable requests, asking me to modify the programs that had already been made. He also required himself to fix various bugs, working up to 10 hours a day, and he even felt that he seemed to be losing some hair. Even the glasses on my nose were bought specifically for this job, in order to relieve eye fatigue. Speaking of this, Cedric became even angrier. He remembered that when he boarded the train today, he was wearing glasses. All my classmates who know me praise me for looking good in glasses and saying that I have a special sense of professionalism. As a result, when I walked into the box excitedly wearing glasses, this annoying guy just slightly moved the account book in his hand to the side. He glanced at himself out of the corner of his eye and said bluntly, "Very good indeed, Mr. Diggory. After wearing these glasses, you finally changed from a silly looking pumpkin head. I have turned into a stupid pumpkin head." It makes me angry just thinking about it. A good job only exists in fantasy. Karl ignored the angry Cedric and continued to pick up another account book. He glanced at the programming code on the other person's laptop and froze in place for a moment. His cheeks twitched wildly as he spoke in a creepy voice. He was still so gentle to everyone a year ago, but now his true nature has been revealed. I became a vampire who only knows how to exploit others and force them to do jobs they don't like. Ah, you talking about me, Mr. Diggory? What? Cedric was still a little confused. He felt like he had heard the other person's words before. After a moment of daze, he finally reacted, looking at Carol in horror. While leaning back, he said tremblingly, "How did you know that? Can you read minds? When did you learn such a terrible black magic?" Looking at Cedric's surprised expression, Karl felt angry and amused. He slowly leaned forward. He pushed Cedric to the corner of the box through a small table and finally stretched out his hands, slapped the other's ears and slapped the wall hard. He looked down at Cedric, who was almost frightened, and spoke in a deliberately low but hoarse voice. "Of course I have been studying the horrible dark magic in a place you don't know. Do you know why I always bring you to me? Why?" Cedric looked up in horror. Karl took his right hand off the wall and slowly moved his claw closer to Cedric's big head. Then stroked it gently. "That's because I like the empty brain. It tastes the best." Ah. Cedric was confused and injured the ravages of the other party's claws at the same time. He said sincerely, "That's not right. Don't dark wizards like to eat the brains of smart people? Why do you like to eat stupid ones? Because you are an idiot." Karl's tone suddenly became heavier, and the right hand that was stroking Cedric's head turned into a knife. Hit that big head hard. Ouch. Cedric cried out in pain, and Karl grabbed his chin with his right hand and twisted his big head to the side. Let the other person look at the laptop screen, which is not turned off. Next time you curse me in your heart, don't put your hands on the keyboard, or you will type out your own thoughts. Your single core processor brain can't handle such a complex problem. Chapter 243. Hermione with a frosty face. Cedric scratched his head awkwardly, looking at the glaring English words among the pile of codes, not knowing how to explain it. Just when he was feeling extremely embarrassed, the door of the box was suddenly opened from the outside. "Carol, what on earth are those accountants you hired in Europe for? Don't they even know the tax laws of their own country? If we record this amount of income, we will lose at least tens of millions of dollars." The voice came before Hermione came in. Miss Beaver, dressed in black, rushed into the box in a hurry. As a result, as soon as I walked to the door, I couldn't help but be stunned. After all, it was such a small space in the box. A handsome blonde boy pushed another equally handsome brown-haired boy into a corner and pinched the other's chin with one hand. Forcing someone to look at something will indeed make them think too much at first glance. "It seems I came at the wrong time." Hermione spoke calmly, but her body had retreated to the outside of the box without her noticing, and the door handle of the box slowly closed. Her face was full of disgust, but the speed at which the door closed made people wonder whether she was reluctant to give up the beautiful scenery before her. "You misunderstand Miss Granger." Cedric, who was just embarrassed, was the first to react. He quickly broke free from Karl and ran to the door. He grabbed the door of the box that was trying to close and explained desperately, "It's not what you think. Karl and I are just working. Just work." Hermione glanced at the box inside through the gap in the door that had not yet been closed. He briefly recalled the scene he had just seen in his mind and shook his head seriously. "Impossible. The actions you two just made don't look like work from any angle. You can't possibly practice gymnastics in the box." This. Cedric was embarrassed. "Ha ha ha." Karl sat back in his seat and laughed in relief. He glared at Cedric, who was also glaring at him. He stretched lazily and said indifferently, "What's there to explain? It's their right to make whatever associations they want with what they see. Besides, I'm not such a coward that I dare not take responsibility for what I do." As he spoke, he turned his gaze towards Hermione and waved his hand gently, causing the door of the compartment that the two of them were holding tightly to open automatically. An elegant chair flew next to the door. "Let's sit down and talk. I already discovered the tax issue you mentioned when you wrote to me. Thanks for your professionalism. I have ordered all those unprofessional accountants to be fired. You have saved us a lot of losses. According to our agreement, 5% of the loss will be deposited into your parents' account. Thank you for your generosity, Mr. Care. Hermione responded calmly, with no expression on her frosty face. Looking at that poker face, Cole was also a little embarrassed. He had never thought about it because of himself. It made a girl who was once full of enthusiasm become as cold as iron. After a brief moment of awkwardness, he saw that Hermione had no intention of leaving, so he asked, "Is there anything else you can do for me, Miss Granger?" Hearing this, Hermione took out a folder from her small bag and handed it over like a robot. Carol took the folder and opened it and saw a complicated form inside. "What does this mean?" he asked, puzzled. "It's just a yearly planning form," Hermione replied calmly. "It's the year's work assignment you gave me as of yesterday. I have finished them all. Considering that we are already in the 2nd grade, the learning tasks may be even more arduous. So I need you to list the detailed tasks that I need to do next year so that I can balance work and study. By the way, my father is just an ordinary dentist and he has no great interest in politics. It would be very stressful for him to go to dinner with those senators." Hearing this, Carol looked at the extremely complicated form in front of him and suddenly felt his previous embarrassment and guilt. It seems a bit redundant. Miss Beaver is still so strong, with changed appearance and personality. Rather than saying that the change is caused by the collapse of the worldview, it is better to say that it is the true manifestation of the true self's character deep in the heart. She is worthy of being the girl who will become the Minister of Magic in the future. If she didn't have some cunning and skill, no one would believe it. Thinking of this, Cole took the document and handed it back to Hermione. "Any questions?" Hermione did not refuse, but also raised her doubts. Karl also gave his explanation very calmly. "No problem. The form you made is very detailed and even complicated, but what I want to emphasize is this. In the coming year, the wizarding world will inevitably undergo profound changes. I'm not sure I can fully control the complexity of this change, so I can't give you a clear goal for next year. So you go back first before the next week comes. How about I give you a month's work goal? Can?" Hermione thought about it briefly, nodded in agreement, and left. She even considerately closed the door of the box before leaving. After she left, Cedric couldn't help but say in his seat with some fear, "Miss Granger's aura is so strong. She is like the next Professor McGonagall, who is angry every day. I remember that he was so enthusiastic and cheerful a year ago. Why did she become like this? And isn't his father a muggle? How could you get involved in our affairs? This is against the rules." As he said this, Cedric looked at Carol with a weird look, as if to say, "It's horrible that you turned your classmates into this, Mr. Hohenzollern." Carol looked at the other person with a strange look and became so angry that he reached out and pinched the other person's face. He forcibly pulled the man up from his position, stared into his eyes, and spoke in a sarcastic tone. "Not everyone can be as open-minded as you, Mr. Diggory. The worldview formed by more than 10 years of education, the impact of a collapse in an instant on a person's psychology, causing a drastic change in appearance and behavior, is a normal psychological phenomenon. Unlike some people who said they couldn't stand this cruel reality, but when they return home, they showed no signs of hunger except for an increase in appetite. You are so unique, Mr. Diggory, one in a million." As he said this, he released his right hand that was pinching Cedric's face and continued to look through the account book while speaking. "As for Mr. Granger, he has nothing to do with you. I just asked him to help me handle some business in the UK. You will know the details later. Now go and do what you should do." "What's the matter?" Cedric covered his red face and said with tears in his eyes, "Of course I have to go to work. This program must be completed today. If I can't, I won't have dessert tonight." "Do not." The ruthless answer, mixed with a roar, echoed throughout the entire train. Chapter 244 Overtime Cake and Fight. "Can I take a break?" "Cannot. Then you can always go buy some snacks. I'm so hungry that I can't even knock." "No, you've gained another 6 pounds. as a model for our company, you need to stay in shape for the next year. If you're really hungry, I have some lettuce mixed with low fat and low sugar salad dressing. I'll give it to you first. As the train roared, the sun gradually slid from the sky to the ground, and it was already dusk. Cedric had been in the box, writing code for almost 5 hours. During this process he kept trying to awaken the humanity of this unscrupulous boss in front of him, but was cruelly rejected by the other party without exception. Even the normal meal request was denied. Looking at the full box of vegetable salad with no oil or sugar, he only felt his stomach twitching, and he looked at Carol with a wronged look and tears in his eyes at the same time. I began to pray in my heart that the train would either arrive at the station soon or something would happen soon. So that he could avoid the vampire's sight and get a moment of respite. Don't look at me like that. Your little tricks won't work on me. Karl put down the account book in his hand and said ruthlessly, while looking at Cedric, who was staring at him. Just as he finished speaking, perhaps because Cedric's prayers had worked, there was a sudden sound of fierce fighting outside the box door. What's going on? Cedric stood up excitedly and was extremely active. Now, as long as he is out of Karl's sight and is no longer forced to write those codes in front of the computer, he is willing to do anything. As a result, as soon as he stood up, Carol pushed him back to his seat. Stay still. If you don't finish this project today, you won't have any food to eat. I mean what I say. As he said this, he stood up and prepared to leave the box to check the situation. Before leaving, he turned around and stared at Cedric fiercely. Don't try to touch my backpack when I'm gone. The food inside is limited. If I find that there is less when I come back, you will be in trouble tonight. After saying that, the door of the box was closed tightly, and Cedric, who was left in the box, barely hesitated for a moment. He immediately rushed to Karl's seat like a hungry dog and opened his backpack. Looking at the small cakes packed in transparent acrylic boxes, tears couldn't help but slide down my mouth. I'll just eat 2 pieces. He won't notice. He comforted himself in this way and then plunged into the pile of delicious food. Carol, who deliberately stood outside the door and waited for a while, couldn't help laughing when he heard the noise inside. How could he not know Cedric's willpower for food? He just knew it. As a boss, we cannot blindly exploit our employees. Sometimes we have to give them a little sweetness and never do it for any boring reason like feeling sorry for them. Besides, who is he? The most vicious and greedy vampire in the British wizarding world. Can his cake be so delicious, since this stinky pumpkinhead used the excuse that he drank coffee and that the taste might have caused his myocardial infarction? Refused to drink coffee to work overtime, then enjoy the sweet cake and experience Professor Snape's craftsmanship as a potion master. 6 servings of the stimulant potion should be enough to keep this guy working until the evening. He listened to the noise in the box and estimated that Cedric had taken the required amount of potion. Only then did he walk contentedly in the direction of the noise and greeted warmly all the students who knew him. Passing through the carriages of the Ravenclaw and Gryffindor students, the compartment of the Slytherin students, where Karl had just arrived. He was stunned by the wonderful scene before him. He saw Ron being pinned down and beaten hard by Draco. Harry on the side tried desperately to pull Draco and persuade them to stop fighting, but it seemed that he could not reduce the other party's anger at all. Next to the 2 fighting teenagers was a new PSP game console that had been crushed. Of course, that couldn't be a real PSP, as it was still about 13 years before the first PSP console was released. This game console was created by Karl, a prototype model, and has been his main work for the past month. In total, less than 10 units were produced, all of which were made by him personally. From the first time he came into contact with magic, he had an idea in his mind, which was to combine magic with modern industry. To see if he could bring the technology of the next decade or so to this world ahead of time. He would have the opportunity to choose the 5 god level rewards he earned by mastering the Saints organization. In addition to choosing Grindelwald's iconic blue flame and his legendary transformation magic. The other 3 are all related to modern technology. One is the automotive related industrial field, and the other is the code field that Cedric is learning. The other is the core of this game console. the field of optical engraving, which uses light magic to directly make chips from today's 1 micron, 1000 nanometers. It will directly increase to a height of 5 nanometers, but now he has not figured out how to mass produce it. So in the past month he made several game consoles by hand and gave them to Draco, Harry and other good friends of his I hope to get market usage. Feedback first, but I didn't expect that when we met again the first market feedback we received seemed to be that it lacked drop resistance. Mr. Hohenzollern, you are finally here. Please persuade Draco. If they continue to fight like this, something bad will happen. Just when Cole was in a daze, Harry, who had been trying hard to persuade others, finally saw his savior. She ran over quickly and begged him. It was only then that Karl realized that he had been standing at the entrance of the carriage, with Ron being pressed under Draco. He had been beaten beyond recognition, with his eyes swollen like a panda, while the Slater students around him were sneering at him. All the angry Gryffindor students would have been blocked outside the carriage by me if I hadn't been standing here stupidly. I'm afraid the whole box has already become a mess. So he quickly waved his hand gently, and an invisible magical force forcibly separated Draco and Ron under him. And they were confined to the 2 nearest seats. But even so, Draco, who was confined to his seat, was still furious. He yelled desperately at Ron, whose nose was crooked and eyes were swollen. "You damn red-haired brat, I'm telling you this is definitely not over. It took me 2 whole months to create this save file. Harry also contributed to this, and you actually ruined him. You are dead, I tell you. You bunch of stinky lions are always reckless like fools." Chapter 245 Perfect Actor On. What are you talking about? You stinky snake. You wanna fight? Slytherin brat. What right do you have to hit someone? Are you Malfoy so overbearing? Just like what happened in Gringotts. My family's vault wasn't robbed at all. Why should we share the loss with you so-called nobles? You bunch of vampires. Dracos. Words undoubtedly instantly triggered the long storage anger of the Gryffindor students who were blocked in the carriage by Karl. In an instant, they were furious and waved their fists, wanting to rush into the carriage and eat Draco alive. This kind of anger should not be underestimated and is unusual. After all, Ron is very popular in Gryffindor. Seeing him being beaten, even out of friendship among classmates, not so many people would be so passionate. As for the reason, Cole was of course very clear about it, and at the same time he realized that he had made a fatal mistake. From the station to the box, Cedric kept muttering and complaining in his ear so much so that during this process, I didn't even notice the depressed atmosphere among the entire Hogwarts student community. Seeing that the robbery at Gringotts had affected the student body, no wonder he could stay so quietly in the box. Not a single classmate came to say hello to him. After all, if he heard that half of his family's property had been robbed, he would be in trouble. He would probably sit in his seat in a depressed mood. As for Draco, who was now the target of public anger, he was taking the blame for himself. Damn it, I didn't notice such an important detail. It's all Cedric's fault. This damn pumpkin head is almost becoming a fatal weakness for me. Karl, who felt that he had made a huge mistake in his work, immediately fell into deep self-blame and frantically criticized himself in his mind. In reality, the atmosphere in the 2 carriages had become extremely tense. Seeing Karl standing motionless at the entrance, Harry became anxious. He quickly walked up to him and pulled his sleeves hard. Said in a plaintive tone, "Carol, please take care of this matter. What should we do about it? Why are you just standing there in a daze?" "Excuse me, beautiful lady." Karl woke up from his self-blame and the first thing he did was to apologize to Harry, and then he looked at the girl in front of him who was getting taller and taller. He shook his head helplessly and sighed in his heart. "What can we do about this? What else can we do? All we can say is that young people's hearts are always moved by beauty. Beauty is really a disaster, but no matter what you think in your heart, you have to do it." He then coughed twice to signal everyone to be quiet, and then looked at Draco, who was still exposed, and Ron, who had been beaten black and blue. He observed both sides carefully and felt something was wrong, but the situation was urgent, so he could only ask questions first. "Alright, you two, tell me exactly what happened. You two can choose to speak at the same time. You can also choose to talk about them one by one. Students and seniors from both Slytherin and Gryffindor are here. You must ensure that what you say is not false. Who will start first? I'll go first. Draco jumped out first without a doubt and pointed at the broken pieces of the game console on the ground. He said with great grief and indignation. Everything was fine. Harry and I were playing this game here, and then this kid jumped over from nowhere. First he said a lot of bad things about Slytherin House in a sarcastic way, and then he said that Harry couldn't stay in Slytherin House forever. What do you mean by bad things? The most annoying thing is that he actually said that I had bad intentions towards Miss Harry. What does he mean by that? It's not enough to talk. After I said a few words and couldn't refute them, you started to fight. Look at the fragments on the ground for yourselves. This is a gift from Mr. Hohenzollern. There are less than 10 of these precious magical creations in the entire British wizarding world. He stepped on me and broke me into pieces. I'll just give him a beating. After saying this, Draco seemed still unsatisfied, even though his body was trapped in place by magic and couldn't move. His hands and legs were still waving desperately like an octopus swimming in the sea, as if he wanted to tear on in front of him into pieces. Well, behave yourself, Mr. Malfoy. After listening to Malfoy's story, Karl reminded the other party indifferently, but he was very happy in his heart. He didn't need to think too much. Looking at Harry, who had no intention of speaking for Rohan, he knew that what Malfoy had just said was basically true, and he also guessed the fundamental reason why the other party was so angry. It wasn't because his game console was broken, nor was it because the save files inside were the result of his and Harry's joint efforts. It was because Ron told the truth that this kid definitely had bad intentions towards Harry. Lies don't hurt people. The truth is a sharp knife. I was a little angry when someone said what was in my heart. After enjoying Malfoy's performance, Karl looked at Ron beside him. He always felt that there was something strange about the red-haired boy in front of him today. But he couldn't explain it clearly, so he looked at Ron and spoke calmly as he asked Draco. Very good then, Mr. Weasley. Mr. Malfoy has just come out, and he can tell you everything he thinks happened. Do you have anything else to add? No. Ron, who was beaten black and blue, said dully with his head down. That's not right. Karl's heart skipped a beat and he looked at Ron with more vigilance. As they had been classmates for a year, he had some understanding of Mr. Weasley. He was the type of person who liked to make excuses, even when he was unreasonable. There is definitely something odd about admitting mistakes so readily. And what the other party said next also confirmed his guess. Ron, who was beaten all over the face, raised his bruised face slightly and spoke in a weak tone. He accused softly. I don't have anything to say, and I don't have anyone paying attention at home, and the same is true at school. I just wanted to talk to my only friend, but I got beaten like this, just because of a few words. I am not as noble as you, Mr. Malfoy, and I'm not as popular as you, Miss Harry. I don't have anything to say, Mr. Hohenzollern. I ruined the gift you gave to the other party, and I apologize, but I don't think I can afford to pay for these precious things. I can accept whatever you want to do. Oh my god. What a brilliant performance. Karl watched Ron calmly say all these words and instantly judged in his heart that this guy was definitely not Ron Weasley. This guy was acting, and he was very good at it. Even he was fooled at the beginning and fell into the other party's trap. Things are starting to get interesting. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 246. Two academies at odds with each other. Karl looked at the red-haired boy in front of him. On the surface, he still had a smile as bright as the sun in front of outsiders, but in the depths of those blue eyes, there was a strong light flashing, which wanted to penetrate the body of the boy in front of him like an X-ray. He also began to recall in his mind everything he had experienced since he entered the carriage, and then he discovered his observation ability. It has indeed decreased a lot, or to put it another way, He is not willing to admit it. A trip with a certain stupid pumpkinhead had caused a very noticeable drop in his natural vigilance. I should have thought from the beginning that Ron and Draco were not much different in physical fitness, even from the perspective of fighting alone. Draco's physical fitness is far inferior to Ron's after all. The students of Gryffindor College all have melee combat soul point, but Draco was actually hitting Ron's head. Even taking into account the blessing of anger, the battle should be a 50-50 match. There must be something strange about the one-sided crushing, which rules out the possibility that Draco can transform into a Super Saiyan. Because of anger, then there was only one possibility, that the silent red-haired boy in front of him deliberately let Draco beat him like this. It is hard to say what the purpose of doing this is, but one thing is certain, his current appearance matches what he just said. The right and wrong of the whole matter has been reversed. Even if Draco was the one who was in the right, he is now probably the one who made the mistake. Mr. Hohenzollern, in my opinion, let's just forget about this matter. Ron has already been like this. There is no need to pursue it further. That's right. It's just a broken toy. What else can you say after beating someone up like this? Slytherin students are inherently evil. Even if there is a conflict, there is no need to fight. Beating someone up like this is wrong no matter what. The fact was just as Karl expected. It was Harry who spoke first, and the other party now had a girlish sensitivity. It seems that he also sensed that something was wrong with the atmosphere and hoped to make things smaller. Others who spoke were Gryffindor students. They were all indignant and criticized Draco's violent behavior. He doesn't care about the other party's property loss or the origin of the incident. After all, it is now in the eyes of everyone. Ron, who was beaten black and blue and looked a little dazed, was the victim. Listening to everyone's chattering, Karl couldn't help but admire Ron's move. He took full advantage of the sympathy for the weak in human nature and packaged himself as a weak person who was completely unequal to his opponent. This can greatly reduce the judgment of other bystanders about the correctness. This situation is not uncommon. For example, many people have conflicts between male and female classmates when they are students without fully understanding the whole story. Most people tend to favor women who are in a weaker position. Also, when there are many brothers in a family, parents will always favor the youngest and weakest one. Needless to say, in society, for example, between small vendors who illegally occupy the road and law enforcement officers who enforce the law with force. Bystanders are always extreme. They only believe, or prefer to believe, what they want to see. Why don't you have to pay for breaking something? Just because you can't win a fight, getting beaten up can cover up your foul mouth. When did the rules of Hogwarts become that whoever gets beaten is right? You are a bunch of stinking lions who can't tell right from wrong. You have no right to speak here. That's right. This is the Slytherin carriage. He can leave if he wants, but he has to pay compensation and apologize. However, there were always some weirdos among the bystanders. Just when Harry was about to make a big deal out of it, the Gryffindor students were outraged. Before Draco, the person involved, had the chance to say anything else, the little Slytherin snakes couldn't help but stand up. Venom was sprayed madly at the Gryffindor students, and all kinds of traditional yin-yang tactics kept appearing. As an auditor, Karl saw the shadow of an old friend in these students. The friendship of Slytherin is indeed well deserved. Although the shortcomings of Gryffindor students are recklessness, they are brave and fearless with a sense of justice. The characteristic of Slytherin is that they are extremely childish, and they never care about their own methods. He is a bit like the villain in Japanese light novels, who does whatever it takes to do something, but also has a unique principle. That is, the friendship between men is as hard as steel. If you are beaten, you must stand at attention, and if you lose, you can wait for an opportunity to take revenge. But trying to shirk responsibility by playing the victim is something that these middle school boys will never allow. The two sides started to curse at each other. If Karl hadn't been blocking the road, both sides would have drawn their wands and started fighting. At this moment, Cole was still staring at Ron. According to what Ron had done in the past year, this was an opportunity to go against Slytherin house. Ron was usually the one who danced the most, but now he just sat there motionless, with his head down, and remained silent. But he lowered his head and deliberately turned to the side, trying his best to show the scars on his face to his classmates in the college. He can still maintain his character at times like this. He is truly a natural performer. Karl praised him in his heart, but Harry was extremely anxious in reality. Seeing that the students from the two colleges were getting more and more outrageous, she became extremely anxious and suddenly yelled, "Okay, stop arguing. This is only the first day of school and there are other first year students in the carriage. Is this how you defend the honor of Hogwarts?" This roar was quite in the style of an angry Professor McGonagall, and the two gangs of Gryffindor and Slytherin. They all shut their mouths consciously, and Harry walked up to Karl angrily. He put his hands on his hips and said angrily, "Mr. Karl Hohenzollern, you are the adopted son of Headmaster Dumbledore and the governor of Hogwarts. How could you allow this to happen?" "I'm sorry, my beautiful lady." Harry's scolding was really full of aura, and the other party even called his full name. Karl had no choice but to admit his mistake. After all, although Miss Harry had no strength, the black bat behind her, this bug still needs to be controlled, and it is still very necessary to maintain good relationships. Cough. Cough. So, with everyone in silence, Karl coughed twice, pretended to think for a while, and then spoke calmly. "No matter what, property loss occurred during this incident, so compensation must be paid. How can this be? Ron didn't even explain what happened. Why should we believe the one-sided statement of that Malfoy kid?" "That's right, Slytherin students are liars by nature. We don't believe what they say." Ron is unwilling to speak. He must have been threatened. "We will not compensate. Absolutely not." Chapter 247. Diverting the conflict. As soon as Karl finished speaking, the group of grumpy little lions in Gryffindor instantly became angry and started yelling. There were inevitably some harsh words in the conversation, which touched the sensitive nerves of Slytherin. Almost in an instant, the atmosphere that had finally been eased became tense again. Just when both sides were about to start another round of verbal abuse, Karl, who had been smiling the whole time, suddenly looked up and shouted, "Shut up, everyone." The sound was so loud that it caused the entire carriage to shake slightly. The magic power had reached 4, which was enough to rival that of the high-level wizard Karl. At this moment, his aura was fully open, and his smile as warm as the sun disappeared, replaced by a look as cold as a Siberian wind. A pair of blue eyes scanned the audience, and the aura he exuded finally made these students remember the unbelievably handsome young man in front of them was not as amiable as he looked. A picture emerged in everyone's mind. That was at the end of last semester. The other party used the Avada Kedavra curse to burn 10 dark wizards and the newly resurrected Voldemort into black snowflakes. The Gryffindor students who had been so aggressive just now suddenly stopped. As for Slytherin, there is no need to say more. This group of middle school boys admire the strong. They had a battle at the end of last semester. Karl's position in the hearts of Slytherin students had long been established, even though he was a Hufflepuff, whom Slytherin students looked down upon the most. There was no effect at all, and the graceful little snakes returned to their seats. While eating snacks or drinking coffee, he continued to look at the Gryffindor students behind Cole with a sarcastic smile on his face. After both sides finally stopped, Karl said angrily, however, considering that Draco used violence against Ron because of this incident, Mr. Weasley does not have to pay the compensation. After this was said, the Gryffindor students were visibly relieved, but the Slytherin students looked a little unhappy. In order to take care of the emotions of both parties, and also to test the Ron in front of him. Carol suddenly changed the subject and teased in a nonchalant tone, "But I don't understand why a Gryffindor would be pinned to the ground and beaten by a Slytherin. I guess the solo Gryffindor is crying in the sorting hat." As soon as these words were spoken, the Slytherin snakes, who had been somewhat dissatisfied just now, immediately stood up and applauded, paying tribute to Draco, who was still in a daze. They no longer had any dissatisfaction. After all, in the minds of Slytherin students, face is more important than money point, as long as it can make the Gryffindors embarrass themselves in front of the Slytherins. A game console is nothing point. As for the little lions of Gryffindor, their faces looked extremely ugly, and at the same time, they lost the sympathy they had just felt for on point. Many of them also disappeared in an instant. Karl felt the changes in the emotions of the people around him, and couldn't help feeling a little proud. He knew that this Ron in front of him was trying to use his classmates' sympathy to cause trouble. It is not clear why they do this, but Hogwarts is their territory and they will never allow anyone to interfere. That's why he deliberately said this. After all, in the hearts of these young and energetic little lions, the friendship and sympathy towards classmates may not be as important as face. Not to mention that Ron was only beaten and not dead. Everyone survived Professor Snape's excessive punishment, so what's the point of being beaten? In contrast, face is still more important. After the emotions of both parties were regained, Karl immediately started the second step, which was what to do when faced with a sudden social rumor. At this time, you should not think about refuting the rumor immediately, but instead create a bigger explosion to attract everyone's attention. What Karl did next was to wrap his head around this thought. He looked at Draco first and said with a smile, "No matter what, this matter ends here today. Go back and help me write a report on my experience using the game console of at least 5,000 words. After you hand it over to me, I will find a way to restore your save file and give you a new game console." 5,000 words? Draco suddenly screamed out of control, looking at Cole with an expression as if he had seen a ghost, and begged, "Mr. Hohenzollern, why don't you let that red-haired guy beat me up? I really can't write a document with so many words. 5,000 words will kill me." The tone and expression of Draco when he said this was so heartbreaking that anyone who heard it would cry. The Gryffindor students glared at him. When they heard Kata say the number of 5,000 words, they couldn't help but feel some sympathy for Draco. Just when the situation was at a stalemate, a small white hand suddenly grabbed Draco, and Harry said seriously, "No problem, Mr. Hohenzollern. We'll write it. No need for you, Harry. I can do it myself." Feeling the warmth and softness on his right hand, Draco suddenly regained his health and refused Harry's help with a proud look on his face. "But we played the game together, so there's also a copy of my save file, right?" Harry pouted and said with some complaints, "Okay, I accept your help." Draco blushed and reluctantly accepted the help. "No more playing, let's go." All the Gryffindor people who were watching the interaction between the two had the same thought in their minds. Fighting and compensation were worthless at this moment. Even if Ron hadn't been beaten half to death, he would have lost the duel completely. After eating enough dog food and dealing with Draco's side, Karl looked at Ron and said in an unquestionable tone, "As for you, Mr. Weasley, I think I need to help you deal with the injuries on your body. After all, you will be attending the opening banquet later. Although we are just ordinary students on this train, we are the adopted son of Headmaster Dumbledore. I still need to maintain the dignity of Hogwarts. Thank you, Mr. Hohenzollern." Ron lowered his head to express his gratitude, his voice so low that it did not attract anyone's attention. But Karl, who was standing nearby, could feel the emotional changes coming from the other person. Just as he was about to make his move, a mocking, veiled voice suddenly rang out from deep inside the Slytherin carriage. "Mr. Hohenzollern is indeed worthy of his reputation, but ordinary healing magic may be useless for such a serious injury. Even if we use professional healing potions, it will probably take a day. I don't know about the legendary Dumbledore's successor. Is there any different method?" Chapter 248 Phoenix Tears. Hearing this, Karl instantly became alert and scanned the entire carriage, trying to find the source of the sound. He looked around for a long time, but didn't see any unfamiliar faces, which made him even more nervous. At Hogwarts, he never emphasized his identity as Dumbledore's heir. Everyone knows that he is the adopted son of Headmaster Dumbledore, but that's all. These people probably don't know his true identity. Moreover, he has been downplaying the relationship between himself and Dumbledore. In the eyes of most students, Karl and Headmaster Dumbledore are more like a naughty grandson and a helpless grandfather at first glance. It was strange to hear someone claiming to be Dumbledore's successor, and the voice even sounded familiar. He also had to doubt that the situation seemed a little unexpected. When faced with unknown potential threats, the best way is to demonstrate strength and force the other party to show up and cooperate with you. Or simply escape and abandon the conspiracy. So, under everyone's gaze, he snapped his fingers lightly, and a ball of orange flame suddenly appeared above his head. A loud, heartwarming bird cry sounded, and a large bird covered in flaming red appeared on Karl's shoulder. Its feathers are as bright as flames, with red, orange and gold interweaving. The feather crest on its head is like a crown. Its tail is long and forked, with a metallic luster, and its eyes are majestic and mysterious, showing its noble and sacred temperament. Phoenix, Mr. Hohenzollern's phoenix. How come it has changed? I remember when I first saw it, it was as fat as a turkey. Ah, you stupid. The phoenix will be reborn after death. This is obviously a return to normal. It's so beautiful, much more beautiful than that half-dead old bird of Headmaster Dumbledore, just like Mr. Hohenzollern, looking at the phoenix standing on Karl's shoulder, glaring at the man who said he was as fat as a turkey. Everyone exclaimed in amazement, and the injured Ron was thrown aside. No one cared about what had just happened. The broken game consoles on the ground, the classmates who were beaten half to death. None of these could stop the little wizards. He tried desperately to get closer to Karl, trying to get a closer look at this beautiful big bird. It's so beautiful. Harry pulled Draco and squeezed to the front of the line, staring at the phoenix in front of him with fascination. It is indeed very beautiful. He stretched out a hand and touched the phoenix's head, but his expression seemed a little lonely. He said in a deliberately sad tone, "If possible, I don't want it to become so beautiful. It was quite cute when it was round before it became like this because it saved my life. I'm sorry, Mr. Hohenzollern." Harry lowered his head with a dejected look on his face. "If it weren't for Ron and me, your plan wouldn't have been ruined. You will not be ambushed by Voldemort, and your phoenix will not be killed by him." As soon as these words were spoken, the eyes of everyone in the two carriages shifted from Phoenix to Ron in an instant. Everyone stared at each other with a blaming look, and many of them even had ugly expressions. The Battle of Hogwarts at the end of last semester has already become a bragging point for all students at home. Throughout the entire summer, wherever Hogwarts students went, there would be legends of the battle. The legend of that war was circulating throughout the European wizarding world. If it weren't for the sudden appearance in Germany of a girl named Grindelwald's heir, the popularity of this war can still be seen on the headlines of major newspapers. But everyone knew very well that the battle was not as simple as they boasted. If Voldemort had not guessed that Mr. Hohenzollern possessed the phoenix, the phoenix blocked the Avada Kedavra with its body. No one dared to imagine what the final situation would be. The fear of what lies ahead is the most terrifying thing. Harry's words made almost everyone present feel a chill down their spine. Feeling the changes in the emotions of the people around him, Karl couldn't help but sneer in his heart, and there was a hint of teasing in his eyes when he looked at Ron. He still couldn't figure out what was going on with Ron, nor could he figure out whether he was involved with the strange noise just now. But you choose your own path. If someone dares to play tricks on you, then let him see who is the best actor in the entire Hogwarts. So he waved his hand to signal everyone to be quiet, then looked at Ron and Harry, and the lonely expression on his face disappeared without a trace. Instead, there was that signature warm smile. There is no need to blame anyone. I don't blame you, Miss Harry, or Mr. Weasley. I just hope that, after going through that, you can grow up and always know that true courage is not recklessness. May the courage of Gryffindor always shine in your hearts. Well, now that this little episode is over, I'll just have to help heal Mr. Weasley first. Then, he gently stroked the phoenix's head, lowering his head, as if to whisper softly in the big bird's ear. But the other students didn't seem to intend to let Ron go. The more open-minded Karl was, the more resentful his classmates became. They stared at the silent Ron, their eyes full of dissatisfaction. Seeing his good friend being glared at like that, Harry became very anxious and wanted to explain. But he felt that the more he talked, the more serious the situation might become. So he wanted to ask Mr. Hohenzollern for help. But if I think about it carefully, the other party has done nothing wrong and has even been generous and magnanimous enough, so I really can't lose face. I want to share the firepower and tell the person next to me that I also have part of the responsibility for the mistake. But no one dared to blame him as to why he didn't vent his anger on Harry. The reason was very simple. Although the little wizards present were naive, they were definitely not stupid. Everyone knew that behind Miss Harry was Professor Snape. Just like that, the victim who had just gained everyone's sympathy was gone after Karl's simple performance. He immediately became a rat crossing the street that everyone wanted to beat, and at this time Karl gently raised his right hand. The phoenix that had been standing on his shoulder spread its wings and flew away. After circling in the carriage for a while, it made a loud bird cry. Then it slowly descended, landed on Ron's messy red hair, slowly lowered its head, and dropped a tear with golden light. That drop of golden tear slowly flowed down Ron's forehead to his face, leaving scary looking scars wherever it passed. The wound healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. In less than half a minute, Ron, who was beaten like a pig, was gone. My health was restored immediately, and my skin even became whiter and cleaner, so much so that many of the senior students present looked at the phoenix that flew back to Karl's shoulder with greedy eyes. Karl ignored those looks. He kept his eyes on Ron and saw that there was no change in the other person until he returned to normal. The doubts in his heart couldn't help but deepen, and just as he looked at the other party, Ron, who had been keeping his head down and keeping silent, suddenly raised his head slowly, revealed a weird smile and said, "Thank you for your generosity, Mr. Hohenzollern." Of course. Karl also answered with a smile on his face, but he couldn't help but feel a little amused in his heart. Because although the young man in front of him was thanking him, he was very sure that the voice did not come from his mouth. Ron's mouth moved slightly, and it could be interpreted from lip reading that he was saying, "Long time no see." Chapter 249. Colberton by a dog and Cedric going crazy. What a troublesome guy. Karl threw the unconscious Cedric on the seat and complained quietly. After dealing with Ron's matter, it was already dark and the train was about to arrive at the station. I thought the day would just pass like this. However, he didn't expect that. As soon as he returned to his box, the scene he saw almost made him faint. All I saw was Cedric, with a red face, sitting in his seat, acting drunk and mad, occasionally emitting a creepy laugh. Sometimes I would hold my computer and cry while saying bad things about him. At first, Karl thought that someone had secretly attacked the Pumpkinhead while he was away from the box. He was so nervous at the time that he carefully checked every corner of the box. After careful investigation, the conclusion he finally reached was a bit ridiculous. The reason is very simple. It is because of those overtime cakes. Magic potions that can boost people's spirits are added to those cakes. However, these potions were not made by Professor Snape, and in order to prevent the potions from ruining the taste of the cake, when Cole was brewing these potions, he used a common drug solvent, which is low alcohol. There was only a tiny bit of alcohol in a piece of cake, but he still underestimated the appetite of the pumpkin-headed man in front of him. He ate up a whole backpack of cakes in less than half an hour. Almost 300 milliliters of low alcohol entered Cedric's stomach. In this way, turned the stupid pumpkinhead into a drunken pumpkinhead. All the way back to the Hogwarts Great Hall, Karl deliberately kept a distance from other people and even rode an ancestral carriage alone. It is to avoid this guy getting drunk and saying something embarrassing. On the road, thinking back to those words, two red clouds appeared on Carol's handsome pale face. Seeing that students from various colleges were gradually taking their seats, he began to prepare to quickly bring this guy back to consciousness. In order to avoid further embarrassment, he first confined Cedric to his seat. He quickly ran to the podium and asked Professor Snape, who had just taken his seat, for a sobering potion. Professor Snape, who was asked for a sobering potion, looked at Karl, whose clothes were a little messy and there were several red marks on his neck. He looked behind him at Cedric, who was trapped in his seat. His face flushed, and burping Pointer's expression suddenly turned very ugly, and he criticized in a cold tone, "Mr. Hohenzollern, I think it would be inappropriate to say that your senior drinks in an ordinary school in any world. Besides, your life is a bit too dissolute and extravagant. I hope you can pay attention to your behavior in school in the future. I don't want to care what you do outside, but in Hogwarts, you have to follow the rules. Of course, I'm an excellent student at Hogwarts. I will definitely." Facing the professor's criticism, Karl apologized with his usual playful smile. Professor Snape's face turned red instantly when he said half of this, and he pointed at me and spoke tremblingly. "What nonsense are you talking about? Too dissolute and extravagant. Can such adjectives be used to describe your dear student?" "Oh, really?" Snape sneered, his deep black eyes looking at Karl's neck. "Then, can you explain the bruises on your neck and the traces of animal saliva that remained, even after being wiped by someone?" "I was licked by a dog," Karl said seriously, with a resolute expression, as if he was ready to sacrifice at any time. "That's a really big dog, Professor." Snape said this coldly, and with a slight wave of his huge robe sleeves, a bottle of light blue potion appeared on the table between the two of them. "Mix it in some sweet liquid. You know, I'm not as picky about the taste of my potions as you are. It might taste a little bitter. Thank you, Professor." Looking at the weird smile on Professor Snape's face, Karl felt like 1,000 horses were galloping through his heart. At the same time, I secretly complained in my heart, "It's not like you don't know how to make delicious potions. The potion you gave Harry doesn't have that weird, disgusting taste, and there are flavors to choose from, and every day is different from Monday to Friday. I'm so glad I helped him so much." "What an ungrateful old bat." After severely complaining about Professor Snape, Cole hurried back to the Hufflepuff table, where his classmates were gradually entering. Professors gradually began to take their seats, and while there were still few people, he poured the bottle of potion directly into the pumpkin juice beside him. He stirred it briefly with a silver spoon, then held Cedric's chin with his left hand in the cup with his right hand. He was about to drink the cup of pumpkin juice, but only a drop of yellow-white liquid fell on Cedric's tongue. That big red face began to distort and deform, and the scene even made Karl think for a moment. This guy is not going to awaken the Camusharingan. "No, I don't want to drink this stuff. I hate you. You always force me to drink your disgusting liquid. I don't want to work overtime. I don't want to drink yours," Cedric screamed desperately, and Karl, who was trying to sober him up, felt as if 1,000 nuclear bombs exploded in his mind when he heard these words. Finally, just when the boy was about to continue speaking, there was a crisp sound of a pottery jar breaking. The drunk Cedric had a big bump on his head and fell into a deep sleep like a baby. Karl threw the broken pieces of the kettle in his hand aside casually, under the weird looks of the senior students and the puzzled gazes of the junior students. He took out a clean white handkerchief and wiped the sticky pumpkin juice off his hands gracefully. "Mr. Hohenzollern, he was talking about coffee. I once treated him to coffee and asked him to work overtime, so he hates coffee and that's it." A concerned greeting came from behind him, and without a moment's hesitation, he answered firmly. When he turned around, Hermione, with a confused look on her face, stared blankly at the young man in front of her who looked as if he had experienced a battle. I asked doubtfully, "I just wanted to ask you about next month's work plan. When are you going to give it to me?" I just asked Professor McGonagall. "There are more elective subjects for the second year curriculum, and I plan to study all of them, so the schedule is tight. I hope you can understand." As she spoke, Hermione couldn't help but look curiously at Cedric, who was sleeping with a big bump on his head and his eyes rolled up. "What's wrong with Mr. Diggory? He's not going to attend the start of term party?" Chapter 250 Undercover from Another Continent. Outside the auditorium. At the end of the entire freshman team was Kevin Lestrange, who used magic to make himself much shorter. Looking around with vigilant eyes, the little wizards lined up in front chattered non-stop. "Did you know that Mr. Hohenzollern once came to my father's company to discuss cooperation?" "I've heard about this from my father too. But isn't your family in the mechanical manufacturing business? Do wizards also use machinery?" "Who knows?" After all, you also saw it in Diagon Alley. The wizarding world doesn't seem to be what we imagined. It's not that different from where we are. The topics I heard along the way were similar to those talked about by the two young wizards in front of me who were also of Muggle origin, whether it's the pure-blood wizards who hide aside and look down on people, or the Muggle wizards who enter the magical world for the first time. It took nearly half an hour to get from the train to the entrance of the auditorium, and this was the topic these little British wizards talked about along the way. Basically, it all revolves around Mr. Hohenzollern. When Kevin Lestrange thought of this, he became a little curious on the train. He hid in the dark and ridiculed the other party with words. Although he did not see the other party's appearance, he did not expect that the other party could actually summon a phoenix. He is indeed Dumbledore's heir, but now it seems that he is an illegitimate child. It seems that it is necessary for me to tell my master Grindelwald about this discovery. Kevin Lestrange's heart was filled with admiration. Just a month ago, the other party suddenly found him. He taught himself a sophisticated camouflage magic and asked himself to sneak into Hogwarts and lurk close to the heir of Dumbledore. Gain the other party's trust and preferably become good friends with them and play a crucial role in the final battle. As soon as he received the task, he felt a great sense of responsibility and spent a month studying English desperately. In order to avoid exposing his identity due to his French accent, he even went to London, England alone and lived there for 2 weeks. Only then did he develop a pure London accent. Whenever he thought of this, he couldn't help but blame himself, thinking that his ability was still not up to that gentleman's expectations. However, just when he was about to postpone the task, his master suddenly told him that he didn't need to hide his name. At the same time, when he expressed his doubts, he spoke with such openness and confidence. "You are the finest young man in our organization, and my daughter and I will always agree with that. You don't have to hide your name. I will help you with everything. We don't need to do anything secretive. We need to make sure that someone in the organization understands what you have done for the organization." When he heard this, he was already extremely excited, and what made him even more excited was that after he finished speaking, the master left him a photo, which was a photo of his goddess, Theodora Grindelwald, wearing makeup. He patted his shoulder and said in an apologetic tone, "Although you don't have to hide your name, this is all I can do for you. From now on until the end of the mission, you will no longer be part of the organization, but an enemy. Forget your current identity forever. I don't know how long it will be, maybe just a few years, or maybe just like what I did before. You have spent your entire life trying to get the result you want. This is my final compensation to you. You can choose to take it, or give it up." Hearing this, he had to admit that he was shaken at that moment. However, when I saw the beautiful blue eyes in the photo, all the panic, self-blame and hesitation disappeared in an instant. He took the photo and carefully placed it in his ancestral magic pocket watch, which he now placed on his left chest. Feeling the power coming from his chest, he couldn't help but put his hands together and muttered softly, "Bel Deus, Jevaus supplidem inspira et de me dona la force necessaire pour surmonter les obstacles de mon chemin. Aide moi rester firm et déterminé dans toutes les situations. Jevaus predentera de votre lumière et de votre grace. Amen." The voice of the prayer was so small, but it still attracted some people's attention. The little wizard from Muggleborn was okay. After all, whether in Britain or on the European continent, there are many people who believe in religion, but for those pure-blood wizards, they still hold deep hostility towards the Catholic Church, a group that once persecuted countless wizards. Just a prayer separated him from the small group of pure-blood wizards. He always found it funny to see those little brats who deliberately distanced themselves from him. As a student at Bogsburton's School of Witchcraft and Wizardry in France. Having played the role of school bully for many years, he is no longer sensitive to such tricks. The small group of pure-blood wizards he had formed in that school had done far more outrageous things than these. But what no one knows is that he is the heir to a famous pure-blood wizard family in France. In fact, he has always been curious about Muggle society. This curiosity may come from his mother, who is a half-blood wizard. Under her guidance, He was full of curiosity and interest in the political philosophy, scientific economics and other aspects of Muggle society since he was a child. But so what? It was not until he entered the magic school from his family that he discovered what he loved. Instead of winning respect for themselves, they were met with countless ridicule and school bullying. Faced with this situation, he spent a whole year learning how to disguise himself and make himself look more likable to those people. I thought I had worn this mask on my face long enough that I almost forgot my real face. However, he did not expect that his interest in Muggle society would become an advantage. After all, Mr. Hohenzollern was said to be very interested in Muggle society, which might be the reason why he was chosen by his master. Now he no longer had to hide himself, but for some reason, he didn't feel too happy. Looking at the chattering little wizards in front of him and the tightly closed door in front of them, he was more afraid of the future. Just as he was daydreaming, the tightly closed door was pushed open from the inside, and an older witch with an outstanding temperament came in front of the young wizards. He said it with full aura. "Now, form two lines, keep quiet and follow me." The young wizards followed the witch nervously, looking at the bright hall that was getting closer and closer. Kevin Lestrange couldn't help but clench his fists and encouraged himself in his heart, "Come on, I hope it won't be an ugly one." Chapter 251, Sorting Ceremony and Sudden Shout. Walking through the door and into the Great Hall, Kevin Lestrange was just like the other little wizards. He looked around excitedly, on the one hand, because he knew very well that as an undercover agent, he could not act too special and had to match his role as much as possible. On the other hand, he was indeed a little curious about the Great Hall of Boxbaton School of Magic in France. It features gorgeous decoration and exquisite design with a strong French style. It is more like a luxurious restaurant paved with white marble, with luxurious Baroque decoration and bright tall floor-to-ceiling windows. But the auditorium in front of him was different. The 4 long tables corresponded to the 4 colleges, and there were bright candles floating overhead. The quaint decorations around it make it look more focused and mysterious, and it is more like a castle of a medieval lord. He had already imagined in his mind the Duke sitting above, holding up his glass after a sumptuous meal, and the knights with square flags below who had just won a victory. Similarly, he raised the wine glass made of ox horn high up and shouted the proverb of the Lord's family at the loudest volume. This is more like a military fortress, and every little wizard sitting here is a future warrior. The Great Hall of Boxbaton School of Witchcraft and Wizardry in France is more like a romantic restaurant where well-dressed teenagers dine elegantly. At the same time, he stole a glance at the girl in a light blue dress on the other side. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel a little emotional as the future heir of the Lestrange family. There was never a shortage of girls around him, and he used to like showing off his manners in front of those girls and inviting them to have a glass of wine or 2. Or ask someone to dance at a regular weekend party. But he never looked up to those girls, even though they were generally beautiful enough. But he always felt that those people had an unpleasant smell of money, even if they played some tricks while dancing. For example, deliberately shortening the skirt or reducing the fabric at the neckline and back. But it's useless. No matter how gorgeous and fragrant the flowers grown in the greenhouse are, they still have a false feeling. Unlike his goddess, when he saw her for the first time, he suddenly understood all the romantic novels he had read. Why would a powerful knight risk his life to climb the highest mountain in the world just to take a look at the flowers growing on the cliffs? Because just one look and you will understand what beauty is. I was there as he held his chest and recalled the best memory of his life. Professor McGonagall, who was leading the group of freshmen, brought a high stool and placed it on the steps in the center of the auditorium. There was a hat on it, and then the hat suddenly jumped, split open, and started singing like a human mouth. The sound was extremely unpleasant and completely hoarse. Tormented by the noise, Helen Lesterland was forced to turn her gaze back to the auditorium. But the moment he looked at the sorting hat, he couldn't help rubbing his eyes, thinking he was hallucinating. Because of the information he had collected before, there was this magical hat used by Hogwarts. All the keywords are dirty, shabby, and ugly, but the hat in front of him is not only unusually clean, but also has a familiar pattern on the surface. took several careful glances across the entire team of freshmen, before he finally determined that this seemed to be a fabric style from the famous luxury brand LV Point, and it was the latest limited edition. The reason he remembered it so clearly was that it was just before he left France. His father was locked outside the room for a whole week by his mother because he failed to buy a bag made of this fabric. Point looking at the greatly changed sorting hat, he felt a little secretly happy in his heart. It seemed that his research on Muggle society was indeed very useful. Point at the same time, I was a little curious about what the legendary Mr. Hohenzollern looked like. Point after all, such a weird operation. You can tell it was the other party's work without using your brain. Point but now, no matter how curious he was, he had to remain calm. Like other little wizards, focus almost all your attention on the hat. Even though the fabric has been replaced and it has become cleaner, it still looks ugly, and it won't look any better when it's worn. Whoever's name I read out will put on the hat and sit down to wait for the results of the sorting. The elegant witch named Mag announced loudly. Point after she finished speaking, Kevin Lestrange could clearly feel that the little wizard in front of him was visibly relieved. Point although he had long known through the information he had collected that the so-called sorting ceremony was a prank for the young wizards in Britain. Point but even so, he still demonstrated the qualities of an undercover agent and tried his best to act like everyone else. James, Ackles, Slytherin, Oliver, Carpenter, Hufflepuff, Janimora, Weasley, Gryffindor, Hawking, Calment, Ravenclaw. As Professor Mike read out the names of the little wizards one by one, the sorting ceremony officially began. Point young boys and girls ran over with great anticipation, and within a few seconds after they put on the hats, the hat began to tell them in a hoarse voice the colleges they were assigned to. Point correspondingly, there will be warm applause from the academy, whose name is called, including Kevin Lestrange, who is standing at the end of the line. Point he had been observing silently, and he scoffed at this division model. He did not need any introduction or reading of any materials. Just by looking at what he saw, he could understand that Slytherin College could basically be regarded as a training base for pure-blood wizards. Gryffindor is a place where the most reckless and disturbing factors in the entire school gather, while Ravenclaw should be considered a gathering place for top students. As for Hufflepuff, it currently looks more like a gathering place for gluttons. In fact, such a branch has divided the students into 369 levels from the very beginning, and those with dark hearts live together with those with dark hearts. Adventurous and reckless people hang out together every day. Mediocre and kind people are put into one group, and arrogant people are also put into one group. Point he was a little confused as to whether this was a school or a factory for contradictions. A school split into 4 parts. No wonder, when I arrived here, some British wizards joked one day that Azkaban was a hidden 5th academy. Point with this kind of gamma play, it would be abnormal if there were no perverts like Voldemort in the British wizarding world. Point it seems that the legendary Dumbledore is just like this, and his heir is probably just like that too. Otherwise how could he be assigned to the most mediocre Hufflepuff? Point when he thought of this, he couldn't help feeling a little smug. Until a loud shout came from above. Kevin Lestrange, where is that bastard? How did he come to England? Karl, you have to explain to me. Chapter 252 Reactions from all parties. Cole wanted to find a crack in the ground to crawl into. He had never understood this sentence so deeply as he did at this moment. Point in his past life, he had never achieved the goal of making everyone in the entire space focus all their attention on him. Point even in that speech at the Berlin Air Defense Tower, he received countless applause and loyalty. Point but he could still feel that there were still people in that building whose eyes were not focused on him. Point but at this moment, when the damn drunk pumpkinhead next to him said such words that could be easily misunderstood, as if it was a conditioned reflex. Point he fell into deep sleep again. Unable to explain, he could only hold his forehead with his hand and remain silent. Point allowing myself to be constantly scrutinized by countless eyes and with all kinds of emotions. It felt like being stripped naked and paraded through the square. Point feeling extremely ashamed, he glanced at the people on the podium out of the corner of his eye. Point Dumbledore, who was sitting in the chief's seat, looked indifferent ever since he had talked with him at Dumbledore's old house that day. Point this old guy seems to be a little mentally ill. He seems to have no interest in anything and has a sour face every day. His hair, which was once as colorful as a rainbow, was dyed a strange fiery red, as if he wanted to use the color of his hair to express his anger. The other male professors, apart from showing some curiosity, did not show anything unusual. However, Professor McGonagall, the dean of her own college, Professor Sprout, and several other older female professors had somewhat strange expressions. It seems like a very complicated emotion, like the feeling of a third party suddenly intruding into the relationship with my childhood sweetheart, who I have grown up with. The look in his eyes was one of reproach as to "you don't know what's good for you, kid." As for our dearest Professor Snape, his face was so dark that no change in expression could be seen. After passing all the professors, Karl unsurprisingly discovered the culprit, Grindelwald disguised as Gilderoy Lockhart. That smile that came from the heart was like thinking over the happiest things in life. "Well, you old thing, I helped you complete the plan, but you actually cheated me. It seems that we need to have a good talk," Karl complained indignantly in his heart, and at the same time, the emotions contained in the many eyes he looked at became more and more intense. In order to avoid a more embarrassing situation, he could only bite the bullet and raise his head, looking at everyone with a smile on his face. "I think we should have more important things to do. We shouldn't let a drunkard's nonsense affect the entire banquet." After this was said, everyone turned their gazes away, and at the same time they probably felt that it was a little immoral to gossip about other people's private lives so blatantly. After he withdrew his gaze, the auditorium, which had been unusually silent just now, suddenly became noisy. Everyone was talking to each other without saying anything, and the atmosphere was extremely awkward. In this noisy and awkward environment, there was only one person who remained calm and silent. Kevin Lestrange, standing under the podium. He was looking at the embarrassed blonde boy in the distance with an incredulous look. He didn't need anyone to introduce him. Just a glance and all words turned into silence at this moment. Those blue eyes are clear and bright, as dazzling as gems, which makes people fall in love with them. Even though there is embarrassment and a hint of shyness in those eyes at this moment, it does not affect the beauty at all. Just like a beautiful painting accidentally stained with a drop of paint, sometimes it may ruin the entire work. But the most talented artists can often transform this unintentional action into the most perfect part of the entire painting. The face he saw now was just like this. Any emotions such as embarrassment, shyness, helplessness, etc. were just perfect embellishments. Kevin Lestrange, Kevin Lestrange, Kevin Lestrange, "Professor, I'm here." Just as he was fascinated by the scene, Professor McGonagall, who was standing above him, called out his name 3 times. It was not until the last time that the other party yelled impatiently that he was awakened from his obsession. Feeling the gazes of the people around him, Kevin Lestrange seemed to understand the embarrassment in Mr. Hohenzollern's eyes, so he lowered his head and quickly walked to the chair and sat down. Professor McGonagall at the side looked at him with a strange look that she had never given to the little wizard before. He first sighed softly, then shook his head helplessly. This feeling was very strange and gave Kevin Lestrange, who was sitting on the chair, a strange illusion. It was as if this lady with outstanding temperament had just watched some strange love drama. Then, just as he was daydreaming, Professor Mike was about to put the sorting hat on his head. Hufflepuff, with a loud click of the sorting hat, this year's sorting ceremony came to an end. Under the strange gazes of the Hufflepuff students, the only young wizard who was not welcomed with applause took a seat at the Hufflepuff table. On the other side, Professor McGonagall held the sorting hat in one hand, with an expression of helplessness and surprise on her face. Because she was very sure that she had not even had time to put the sorting hat on the child's head. She had just picked up the hat when the tattered hat announced the result impatiently. "I hope Hogwarts doesn't close down, Professor." McGonagall prayed silently in her heart, then left with the sorting hat. After she left, Dumbledore, whose hair was dyed like phoenix feathers, knocked on the golden cup in front of him with a pure silver spoon. The auditorium, which had been somewhat awkward, but also very noisy, gradually quieted down after 3 crisp metal collision sounds. "I am happiest at this time of year, because Hogwarts welcomes many lovely children again. May You spend a wonderful 7 years here. In the past, I would emphasize the harm and temptation of black magic to people. What I have to say now is that there are things that are far more terrifying than black magic, including emotions that arise from nowhere, as well as the endless pursuit of material desires and the pursuit of wealth that does not belong to you. I hope you can stay true to your heart, avoid being influenced by the evil tendencies of some people, and spend the next beautiful years with a happy, cheerful and upright attitude. Okay, now that we've talked, let's have a feast. After the principal finished his speech, countless steaming delicacies of various kinds immediately appeared on the empty long table point. Unlike the previous combination of fish and chips, steak and fried chicken, this time there were a variety of delicious dishes on the table point: exquisite French cuisine, bold German pork knuckle with non-alcoholic beer, Italian noodles and special pizza point, and the most important and diverse Chinese dishes. But no matter how many delicious dishes there were, they could not attract Karl's attention. He silently picked up a glass of wine and stared through the glass at the handsome young man on the podium, who was forcing Dumbledore to drink tequila. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.